Mommy. I heard my daughter's voice, sounding surprised and worried. I tried hard to stay awake, but I couldn't, and I fell unconscious right in front of her. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My daughter was holding my hand tightly, not wanting to leave me alone. I felt bad for scaring her. I was about to say sorry when she spoke first. Mommy, the baby in your tummy says they don't want Daddy to erase them. Her words surprised me. My name is Linda Williams. I'm 27 years old, and I take care of our home. I live with my husband, Mark, who is 2 years older than me, and our daughter, Sarah, who is 4 years old. Before, I used to work as a sports trainer, but I had to stop because I got pregnant. It made me sad to leave my job, but I wasn't feeling well often after I found out about the pregnancy, so I didn't have a choice. It was tough for me to quit, but there were some good things too. Before that, Mark didn't really help out much with chores or taking care of Sarah, but he started doing more to help me out. Even though I was worried about my health, I was happy to see Mark changing. I thought things would be okay. Mommy, wake up. It's morning. I woke up to Sarah's voice, and it was already 7 a.m. Sarah's daycare bus comes at 7:30 a.m., so I got up quickly. Oh no, Sarah, we have to get ready fast. What happened? We slept too late. If we don't hurry, we'll miss the bus. While brushing my teeth, I worried that Sarah might get confused. When I left the room, I realized I hadn't seen Mark anywhere. He usually leaves by 7:15 a.m., so he should still be at home. Maybe he's downstairs having breakfast. I felt a bit annoyed that he didn't check on us, but I headed for the stairs. Then it happened. I slipped, and for a moment, I felt like I was flying through the air. I'm going to fall. I reached out instinctively and grabbed onto the handrail, stopping myself from tumbling down the stairs. Phew, that was close. I immediately put my hand on my stomach, but I didn't hit it, and it didn't hurt. Just as I let out a sigh of relief, Sarah, looking worried, rushed over. Mommy, are you okay? I'm fine, honey. Sorry for scaring you. I reassured Sarah as I hugged her tightly. Then Mark, hearing the noise, hurried over from downstairs. What happened? I slipped and almost fell down the stairs. Whoa, be careful. I'm sorry, but it felt like the floor was really slippery and… Wait a minute. I noticed that the floor looked cleaner than usual. I hadn't noticed before, but the wooden floor in the hallway was shining, like someone had polished it. Mark then explained in a flustered tone. All right, I waxed the floor last night. Waxed? Why did you suddenly decide to do that? I noticed it while cleaning the floor, but I guess I got a little too excited. I'm sorry, Mark explained. Oh, I see. I was surprised that he had waxed the floor, something he had never done before. But lately, he had been helping out a lot more with chores around the house. So maybe he was starting to notice the little things. Once men start paying attention to details, they just can't stop, can they? Even though it seemed a bit strange, I decided not to worry about it. A few days later, on a Sunday, Mark had to work, so I took Sarah to the park by ourselves. Before, I used to run around and play with Sarah, but I couldn't do that now. I watched Sarah happily playing on the swing, with a water bottle Mark had prepared for me in my hand. Who would have thought that Mark would start preparing things like a water bottle for me? When Sarah was born, Mark wasn't interested in anything at home. It still makes me emotional when I think about it. He didn't seem interested in Sarah either, so whenever I talked to him about it, he got upset, and he started coming home from work later and later. The fact that he now prepares a water bottle for me is still surprising, but it makes me really happy. Thinking about this and feeling a bit thirsty, I decided to take a sip of the tea Mark had made for me. Then, Mommy, Sarah called out suddenly. After drinking about a quarter of the bottle, I suddenly felt dizzy and started to feel unsteady on my feet. I held onto the swing's fence for support, but even then, I could feel myself getting weaker, and it was hard to stay standing. Mommy, what's happening? Help, Mommy! I heard Sarah's voice, sounding surprised and worried. I tried my best to stay conscious, knowing that if I fainted, Sarah would be left alone. But despite my efforts, I collapsed while shielding my stomach. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was the bright white ceiling above me. I felt disoriented for a moment, but then I noticed the smell of disinfectant and saw a nurse approaching, asking, "Are you okay?" It dawned on me that I was in a hospital, and then I thought of Sarah. "Excuse me, do you know where my daughter is?" She was with me when I passed out. I asked the nurse as I sat up. She nodded understandingly and reassured me with a smile. "She came to the hospital with you in an ambulance. She should be with your husband now." My husband? He left work early to come here. He arrived a little while ago. He's such a caring husband, the nurse informed me before leaving the room to call them. Feeling relieved that Sarah wasn't alone, my head started spinning again, and I collapsed back onto the bed. Why did I faint when there were no issues during my previous prenatal checkups? Was it because I moved around too much, or did I eat something bad? As these thoughts raced through my mind, I suddenly remembered the tea from the water bottle that I had drunk just before I fainted. Come to think of it, that tea, just as I pondered this, the door opened and the nurse, a doctor, Mark, and Sarah entered. "Mommy," Sarah exclaimed with relief. "Sarah, I'm so glad you're here. I'm sorry for leaving you alone," I said, relieved to see her. "I'm okay. But what about Mommy? Are you okay, Mommy?" Sarah asked, sounding worried. "Yeah, I'm feeling better now," I reassured her, patting her head as she rushed over to me. The doctor smiled beside me. In the end, the doctor decided that I needed to stay in the hospital for 2 or 3 days. After they finished examining me, both the doctor and the nurse left the room. Mark said, "I'll go get a drink," and he left too. In the hospital room, it was just me and Sarah. Then Sarah seemed a bit uneasy, like she wanted to say something. "What's on your mind, Sarah?" I asked. "Mommy, can you promise not to tell Daddy a secret?" Sure, but why?" I was curious, but I agreed, and Sarah leaned in closer to me with a serious expression. "The baby says they don't want Daddy to make them disappear." Huh? I was momentarily stunned, unable to comprehend what Sarah was trying to say. Sarah then looked a bit frustrated and spoke louder. "The baby says Daddy's being mean, and the tea in the water bottle." Her words caught me off guard. I had also noticed an odd bitterness in the tea from the water bottle. When I drank it, I thought maybe Mark had bought a different kind of tea, so I didn't think much of it at the time. But now, thinking back, I felt a wave of dizziness right after drinking that tea. A small part of me wondered if there was a connection to my fainting spell. "But what does it mean?" the baby is saying. "Hey, Sarah. Sorry I took so long. The cafeteria was busy." Mark interrupted as he walked back into the room. I was so surprised by his sudden appearance that I couldn't bring myself to ask Sarah further about what she meant. Sarah seemed uncomfortable and buried her face in the bed. "Is everything okay?" Mark asked, noticing the tension in the room. "Nah, it's nothing," I replied, trying to brush off the tension. "Well, whatever. I'm heading home for today. I have work tomorrow. Just rest up, okay?" Mark said as he took Sarah's hand and left. Sarah hesitated for a moment before following him. "Let's go home with Daddy today. Mommy is staying at the hospital," Sarah said as they left. "Ah, okay," I replied, feeling uneasy as they walked out. I couldn't shake off the worry about Sarah, but there wasn't much I could do at the moment. I just had to focus on getting discharged as soon as possible and settled back into bed. But Sarah's unsettling words lingered in my mind, making it hard to sleep. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital while my husband was at work, so my friend Kimberly came to pick me up. Kimberly was a friend from the gym where I used to work, and she had been looking after me since I had to quit due to my health condition. "I was shocked to hear you fainted, but you seem to be doing much better than I thought. I've been sleeping so well in the hospital that I feel much better. I'm glad. I was worried because you're pregnant," Kimberly said as we talked in the car on our way home. As we chatted, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. I had been feeling tired and foggy-headed lately, but surprisingly, I started feeling better after just a few days in the hospital. It struck me that the only significant change during that time was that I had been taking a break from household chores and childcare, and I had been eating balanced meals in the hospital. And then it hit me. So that means I didn't eat Mark's cooking yesterday. I recalled several odd occurrences since Mark had taken over the housework. Besides almost slipping on the freshly waxed floor, there were other incidents that bothered me. Things would be placed in unusual spots, causing me to trip. Once I was told the shower was ready, that there was no hot water, only cold water. It happened often, especially during winter, which made me rush to the hospital out of concern for the baby. Thankfully, everything was fine, but it was incredibly stressful. I had initially dismissed these incidents as simple mistakes caused by Mark's lack of experience with housework. But upon reflecting on them now, each one seemed like it could have serious consequences if one wrong step was taken. "Linda, we're here," Kimberly's voice interrupted my thoughts. "Oh yeah." I realized we had arrived at the house. Seeing my quiet demeanor, Kimberly looked at me with concern. "If you're not feeling well, you should let me know, okay?" "Yeah, I will. Thanks. You should rest for today at least. I'll go pick up Sarah, okay?" "Thank you, I really appreciate it," I said as we got out of the car together. I made a mental note to have a proper conversation with Sarah once she returned in the evening. When Sarah came home with Kimberly, she even brought some deli food for dinner and told me to call her if anything happened before leaving. She was like a superhero, and I couldn't help but feel grateful. As we ate dinner with the deli food Kimberly had brought, I felt surprisingly well, so I decided to talk to Sarah again. "Can we discuss what happened the other day?" I asked, and Sarah nodded seriously. "Sure, Mommy. What do you want to talk about?" she asked. "Do you think you could talk to the baby in my belly, Sarah?" Yes, Sarah nodded firmly. Her sincerity was evident, and I couldn't help but believe her. "Then can you tell me again what the baby is saying?" I asked. "Well, the baby is scared of Daddy," Sarah began, her voice serious. "Daddy is trying to hurt us on purpose and separate Mommy and the baby, so the baby is holding onto Mommy as tightly as possible." I was speechless at Sarah's words. Though her explanation was simple, it connected all the strange occurrences, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were deliberate attempts to harm the baby. The realization sent shivers down my spine. "Mommy, what's wrong? Are you in pain?" Sarah asked, tears welling up in her eyes, clearly worried about me. "Sarah, I'm sorry, I'm okay." I reassured her, hugging her tightly as I wiped away her tears. In that moment, I made a silent vow to myself. I needed concrete evidence or no one would believe what was happening. The next day, after watching my husband leave for work, I retrieved a baby monitor from the back of the closet. It was something we used when Sarah was a baby. If this revealed what I feared, it would be terrifying. But if it showed nothing, that would be a relief too. With a glimmer of hope, I hid the camera behind a houseplant. A few days later, I mustered the courage to check the footage. What I saw was beyond anything I could have imagined. It shattered the small hope I held onto. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't let this go unpunished. A week or so passed since I saw the footage. Earlier in the day, I had left Sarah at my parents' house. Now, I had tidied up the entire house and prepared a perfect dinner before Mark came home. Mark finally arrived and was surprised to see the elaborate meal set on the table. "What's going on? I could have made dinner." "I can't let you do anything dangerous anymore," I said firmly. "Huh? What do you mean?" Mark asked, a hint of caution in his eyes. "I mean exactly what I said. What have you been feeding your pregnant wife all this time? I don't understand it at all." "My health has improved significantly since I stopped eating your cooking for the past week," I explained, my tone serious. Mark seemed slightly shaken by my words. As I continued to speak, I noticed his expression shifting. "I've been pretending to eat your cooking and throwing it away," I confessed. Mark's eyes widened in surprise. Meanwhile, as I investigated around the house, I noticed that the non-slip pad under the rug was missing, and the anti-tip device on the bookshelf next to the bed had been removed. It sent shivers down my spine. These actions weren't just aimed at our baby, they implied that I was also a target. When I glanced at Mark, I noticed his mouth twitching as he attempted to force a smile. Suddenly, I recalled instances when body wash had spilled on the bathroom floor after a shower and items had fallen from shelves. If I had slipped and hit my stomach during any of those incidents, it could have been disastrous. Those were just coincidences, right? Maybe I just made a little mistake, I mused aloud. I thought so too, until I saw this. I thrust my phone in front of his face and played the footage recorded on the baby monitor. In the video, Mark was clearly heard speaking on the phone. I understand, but it's not going as planned. It's surprisingly difficult to make someone disappear in an accident. Well, 2 people. It would be best if the baby in the belly could disappear too. Mark's voice echoed from the video. The words sent chills down my spine, no matter how many times I heard them. As I watched Mark, I noticed him trembling slightly and remaining silent. Despite my wariness, I continued to speak. The person on the phone is a woman, isn't it? You're discussing doing terrible things once I'm gone, things too disgusting to even mention. How dare you spy on me like this? I'll sue you. Do you even understand what you've done? Just shut up. Just shut up. Mark exploded, his face turning bright red as he lost control and lashed out at me. Instinctively, I hunched over to protect my stomach. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and I heard Mark scream, "Landa, are you okay?" "Kimberly, thank you," I said with relief as I looked over to find Kimberly, who had easily subdued Mark and was now laughing. In fact, she's a strong woman who has won the national wrestling tournament multiple times. I had asked Kimberly to stand by in the next room just in case. Mark, pinned down by Kimberly, was now shouting angrily, "You think you're alive because of me, right? Yet you keep bothering me with demands to play with the kids and help with housework. If you all would just disappear, I could live freely. Just get lost, for my sake, you idiot." "So, that's what you think. But thank you, huh? Actually, you just helped me a lot by self-destructing," I said calmly, thrusting my phone, which was on a call with 911, in front of Mark. I had put it on call mode earlier, so all of Mark's words had been recorded and sent directly to the police. "Please, not the cops," Mark pleaded, struggling to escape Kimberly's grip, but she held him firmly in place. "I'm sorry, I was wrong, please. I apologize, forgive me." Mark continued to beg, but it was too late for apologies. "That's not something you can get away with just by apologizing. What you were about to do." "Don't say such things," Mark interrupted, thrashing around. Suddenly, the sound of several footsteps and a voice saying, "We're coming in," echoed, and police officers entered through the unlocked door. In no time, Mark was taken away. Even as he was being escorted out, he pathetically clung to me, pleading for help. A subsequent investigation uncovered Mark and his mistress's sinister plan. Their objective was to eliminate me, who stood in their way, so they could be together. Even if they failed to get rid of me, they planned to fabricate a story about the loss of our child due to my carelessness, leading to divorce. Moreover, they hoped to blame me for the incident to claim compensation during the divorce proceedings. The audacity of their scheme leaves me speechless. Even now, the thought of what could have happened if I hadn't noticed anything sends chills down my spine. "Mommy, the baby is happy. She says she can always be by your side," Sarah said as soon as I picked her up. "Yes, I'm so glad. It's all thanks to you," I said, thanking my daughter from the bottom of my heart as tears of relief flowed. "Mommy, why are you crying?" "The baby is looking forward to meeting you." "I'm also very excited," Sarah said, noticing my tears. A month after Mark's arrest, our divorce was finalized. A few months later, with Matt by my side, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Sarah was overjoyed to meet her little sister and has since become a very reliable big sister.
Are you still not moved out? Hurry up and leave. Mother-in-law Lisa said this, waving her hand as if shooing away a bug. Next to Lisa, Karen, my husband's mistress, wore a triumphant smile. When I glanced behind them, I saw Karen's son, Larry, looking at me worriedly. "There's no need to rush so much. Just get out already," Karen said with a nasty grin, making Larry's expression turn sad. I smiled at Larry and gave Lisa and Karen a cold stare. "I'll be gone in 2 hours. Rest assured." "Fine, just hurry up and pack your things," my ex-husband Matthew said with a nasty smile. I wondered why I ever loved this man. Just then, my smartphone buzzed with a message. "Oh, it looks like my ride is here. I'll be leaving now. Bye." The message said my ride had arrived. So, I grabbed my belongings and left my husband's house immediately. "Thank you for picking me up." I got into the luxury car parked outside. "What's going on?" Matthew and Lisa came out, eyes wide with surprise. "I am Jessica White, a 27-year-old CEO. Since I was a child, I had a dream. I wanted to create my own design company." "Jessica, you draw so well." "Yes, I want to dress her in different clothes." I loved drawing since I was young. I always drew pictures of girls. I would think about what clothes to dress them in, what colors would make them shine more. I want to learn more about design. Eventually, I became interested in design itself and decided to attend a design school. During my studies, I met someone special. "Jessica, I love your designs. I want to create designs like yours." Her name was Melissa Clark, the heiress to a large design company. "Thank you. I like your designs too, Melissa. I'm glad to hear that. And you're also studying business, right? I really respect that." Melissa was learning about business from her father while studying design. I truly respected her and was glad to become her friend. "I think you have a talent for business too, Jessica. Would you like to study with me?" One day, she suggested we study business together. As we learned, I started thinking about having my own company. After graduation, I trained under her father, James. "You'll be fine. Go ahead and do what you want." A few years later, with James's blessing, I finally established my own company. I was busy and fulfilled, living my dream. "Jessica, if you're interested, I have someone to introduce to you." One day, James approached me with a proposal. A friend of his had a single son, and the parents were looking for a match. "I'm Matthew White. I've heard a lot about you, Jessica." Matthew, who would become my husband, was introduced to me. He was a sincere man and always treated me seriously. I was attracted to him and decided to marry him after a year of dating. "I'm so happy to have such a lovely daughter-in-law." Mother-in-law Lisa warmly welcomed me and celebrated our marriage. By the way, Matthew's father was not around. He left several years ago, according to Matthew. I thought I would lead a fulfilling life with work and family. One day, a message from Lisa. While at work, I received a message from Lisa. I was in an important meeting at that time and missed it. I was too busy that day to call her back. She's definitely going to complain. I sighed and called her back after work. "Oh, you finally called. Sorry, I've been busy with work." "That's fine. I have something important to talk about." Normally, she would complain and ask why I didn't answer the phone sooner, but today she let it go. Despite a bad feeling, I listened to her. "Actually, I need financial help." I was shocked and froze at the unexpected request for money. Meanwhile, Lisa started explaining on her own. Apparently, Matthew's sister Karen had returned home after a divorce. "And it's affecting our finances." "Is that so?" "It's not just Karen, she has 3 kids with her," Lisa muttered. Hearing this, I was honestly conflicted. As a CEO, I earned enough to live comfortably with some financial aid. But even though they were family, I didn't have a deep enough connection to provide support so easily. "Are you planning to abandon us? What a terrible wife you are!" Noticing my hesitation, Lisa started yelling. I sighed deeply. I'll discuss it with Matthew, so please wait a bit. Suppressing my frustration, I managed to respond. Before we got married, Lisa was a very nice person. But as soon as we got married, her interference became unbearable. Are you taking care of Matthew? Aren't you neglecting the housework because of your work? She would call me almost daily with such comments. Honestly, as a busy CEO, these calls were nothing but a burden. So, I had told her once before. I'm busy with work. I'm a CEO. Women's work isn't that important, so prioritize my talks. But she got angry and scolded me instead. Lisa didn't believe I was a CEO at all. She thought I was doing some minor errands at best. As a CEO, I have a lot of responsibilities. What are you talking about? There's no way you can be a CEO. Don't lie. Even when I explained clearly, she just responded like that. Lisa didn't believe anything I said and treated me like a worthless liar. Even now, she says, you don't do any important work, and you don't help around here. So at least give us some financial aid. She continued to say such things. I'll discuss it with Matthew. I told her again and hung up the phone abruptly. Well, even if I talked to Matthew, the answer was obvious. To suppress my anxiety and frustration, I took a deep breath. Hey, your mom called asking for financial help. That night, I quickly consulted Matthew about Lisa's request. Just handle it as you see fit. His response was indifferent. His attitude had changed since we got married. Before marriage, he was very kind, but now he hardly listened to me. It seems Karen has returned home after a divorce. What? Karen? But when I mentioned his sister's name, he looked at me with trembling shoulders. Did you say Karen? Yes, I'm sure she said Karen. Surprised by Matthew's reaction, I nodded. We're not short on money, so we can afford to help a bit. Matthew had always been indifferent to what I wanted to do or what I was planning, saying do as you like. But the moment he heard the name Karen, he started listening seriously. Of course, I didn't feel good about that. All right. Maybe just a little. But it had been so long since Matthew paid attention to me. I was so happy that I couldn't help but nod. Even though I earned a decent amount as a CEO, I couldn't give a large sum. The fact that it wasn't a loan but financial aid gave me a bad feeling. Thank you. How about $2,000 a month? $2,000? That's too much. How about $500 for now? $500, huh? Well, it's better than nothing, I suppose. So, we decided on $500 a month in aid. That amount wouldn't significantly change my lifestyle if I budgeted a bit. Soon after starting the aid. Who's this? I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Thinking it might be a business contact, I answered the phone despite my suspicion. Finally. What do you think you are, making me wait? Who is this? It's Karen. The caller was Karen, Matthew's supposed sister. She must have gotten my contact information from Lisa. A heads up would have been nice. What can I do for you? Oh, right. Thanks for the aid. She called to thank me for the aid, apparently. But $500 is pretty stingy, don't you think? Her laughing comment made me angry. Is this how someone receiving aid talks? If you're unhappy, I won't help you. What? Are you that heartless? Are you saying my kids should starve? You're a terrible person. Karen complained and hung up the phone. Did I make the wrong decision? After talking with Karen, I felt reluctant to continue the aid. But ultimately, it was my decision to help. I'll keep an eye on things for now. So, reluctantly, I continued the aid, but there was no word of thanks. Jessica, let's live with my parents. What? What are you talking about all of a sudden? One day, Matthew suddenly suggested we live with his parents. Apparently, Lisa had hurt her back, and he wanted us to live with them to help her. But isn't Karen there? She's back home living with them. Karen is raising kids. She can't take care of Mom on top of that. Matthew argued back when I mentioned Karen. We had several discussions but couldn't reach an agreement. I'm fed up with you. I'll take drastic measures. In the end, Matthew sold our house, claiming it was in his name. He even sent our belongings to his parents' house. As a result, we had no choice but to live with them. Get to work. That's right. As a freeloader, you better make yourself useful. Lisa and Karen started treating me like a servant. They ordered me to clean their rooms, cook what they wanted, and more. And when I worked late, they would whisper, "What is she doing so late? What is she doing so late? Really, she's so disgusting." They would say such things behind my back. Already exhausted from work and household chores, their harassment pushed me further into despair. Let me help you. Karen's oldest son, Larry, was the one who helped me. He secretly assisted me without Lisa or Karen knowing. Why are you helping me? Actually. He looked apologetic as he revealed the truth. Our father's name is Matthew White. Matthew? My husband? Yes. My mom isn't his sister. It turned out that Karen was not his sister but his mistress. They had been together since their student days, and Larry and his siblings were Matthew's children. This can't be! I was stunned by the truth, unable to speak. But soon, my thoughts turned to anger. It seems they've been underestimating me. I will never forgive them. With that resolve, I immediately took action. After making all the necessary preparations, I confronted Matthew. Matthew, I want a divorce. I handed him the divorce papers. What? Where did this come from? I know about you, Karen, and Larry. Matthew looked annoyed. His lack of excuses made me realize he had no love for me. Oh, that's perfect. We don't need a useless daughter-in-law like her. That's right. Matthew has me, so it's fine to get rid of her. When Matthew tried to say something, Lisa and Karen chimed in, having overheard the conversation. Pushed by the two, Matthew signed the divorce papers. And so, we divorced. Well, I better get out quickly. While filing the divorce papers at the courthouse, I contacted someone to help me move out of Matthew's parents' house. Since I had already prepared, I could leave the same day. So, I decided to leave quickly. Lisa watched me with a nasty smile. Are you still not moved out? Hurry up and leave, Lisa said, waving her hand as if shooing away a bug. Next to Lisa, Karen also wore a triumphant smile. When I glanced behind them, I saw Larry looking at me worriedly. There's no need to rush so much. Just get out already, Karen said with a nasty grin, making Larry's expression turn sad. I smiled at him and then gave Lisa and Karen a cold stare. I'll be gone in 2 hours. Rest assured. Fine. Hurry up and pack your things, my ex-husband Matthew said with a nasty smile. I wondered why I ever loved this man. Just then, my smartphone buzzed with a message. Oh, it looks like my ride is here. I'll be leaving now. The message said my ride had arrived. So, I grabbed my belongings and left Matthew's parents' house immediately. Thank you for picking me up. I got into the luxury car parked outside. What's going on? Matthew and Lisa came out, eyes wide with surprise. Ignoring their shocked expressions, the car started moving. That must have been tough. The driver, my friend Melissa, said while driving. I had been venting to her for a while. Leave that family behind. She had always told me this and immediately came to pick me up when I told her I filed for divorce. Considering she got there in a few minutes for a normally 2-hour drive, she might have been waiting nearby. Now it starts, Jessica. Let's show them what we're made of. Yes, I'll make them regret this. Melissa was even angrier than I was about Matthew's actions. Grateful for her support, I I talked about my plans. For now, can I stay at your place as planned? Of course! I was going to stay at her house. Melissa's house was much bigger than the one Matthew and I used to live in, or even Matthew's parents' house. So, having one more person wouldn't be a problem. Melissa's house is really big. Standing in front of her house, I realized how different it was from mine, even though I was also a CEO. It was a mansion. Jessica White, correct? As I was thinking that, a man approached me. Let me introduce you. This is Brian Smith, my distant relative. He was Melissa's relative and a lawyer. He was going to help me with the alimony and other matters. Melissa told me a lot about you. I'll take care of everything. Yes, leave it to me. We'll definitely win. His confident nod made me smile in return. Then, we started taking action immediately. First, we filed for alimony from Matthew and Karen. We also planned to sue Lisa for all the abuse and insults. We have plenty of evidence. With those words, I handed him the evidence. Actually, the evidence was gathered by someone else. With this much evidence, it's more than enough. Thanks to that, I was able to sue them successfully. It wasn't long after that. You've got to be kidding me! I received a call from Matthew on my smartphone. Quite a greeting. I'm not kidding at all. I'm not kidding at all. I received the lawsuit. What is this about? What do you mean, what is this? It's obvious. You were cheating. Did he really think he could get divorced without taking any responsibility? I smiled at Matthew over the phone. Don't worry. I'll make sure you take responsibility. When I said that, I could hear him fall silent on the other end. Are you serious? Of course, I'm serious. Don't think you can get away with underestimating me. I told him, who couldn't believe it, and then I hung up. Their nightmare was just beginning. I'll make sure they get what they deserve. The day after his call, I received a call from Lisa. How could you do this? What do you mean by sending those things? Apparently, she saw the copies of the evidence I sent along with the alimony request. The evidence clearly showed Lisa harassing me. It was enough to sue her, and it was clear that a third party had taken the footage. There's no way this was taken naturally. It's obviously fake. Actually, I didn't take the footage. I calmly explained to the ranting Lisa. In reality, I didn't have the time to record anything like that. Then who? Lisa muttered, and I handed the phone to the person next to me. I took it. Larry? As soon as Larry spoke, Karen started yelling on the other end. It seemed she was there too. Why are you there? Actually, Larry had brought his younger siblings to our house. And he began to explain calmly to the clueless Karen. If we stayed in that house, it would ruin us all. Larry explained that his mom seemed lively when she was harassing me. I'm ashamed of such a mother. How dare you talk to your mother like that? Karen started yelling again, and Larry sighed. He handed the phone back to me. I don't want to talk anymore. That's how it is, so leave this to me. I told her and hung up the phone. Then I turned back to Larry. What will you do now? I don't know yet. But a children's home is better than there. Larry spoke firmly. Before I moved into his parents' house, they had been neglected. Karen would go out every day and come back late at night. She slept all day and never took care of them. Grandma loved us because we were her grandchildren, but she didn't let us do anything. Lisa, on the other hand, treated him and his siblings like babies. She wouldn't let them do anything dangerous, or anything at all. When they tried to study, she would say, "Your boys, go play outside," and kick them out. Conversely, if they tried to play outside with friends, she would say, "It's dangerous to go out alone," and stop them. Because of this, they couldn't do what they wanted and were constantly subjected to her contradictory words, which built up frustration in them as children. Feeling sorry for them, I discussed it with Melissa and invited them to stay at my house. Then, let's live together in this house for a while. He nodded with a smile at my suggestion. We then reported and consulted with CPS about him and his siblings. As a result, Karen lost custody. In that case, we'll take care of them. Melissa's father, James, suggested this. Melissa had studied business but chose not to take over the company. I'm going to follow my own path. She now works for a small design company. So, she wanted to raise Larry as a future successor. If it's okay with me. Larry responded positively to this. I also trust and respect James. I felt confident leaving Larry and his siblings in his care. Of course, I'll help too. Melissa was also eager to help. Now I can bring that house down to hell without any worries. One day, while I was thinking about that. You ruined everything! You ruined everything! Matthew came to my company. He claimed it was terrible that I took Karen's children away. He also implied that I had leaked unnecessary information to the company. He came to complain about it. Because of you, I can't stay in the company. Matthew tried to shift the blame to me. Annoyed, I decided to explain everything to him in detail. Do you think I don't know anything? The relationship with Karen had continued even before our marriage. He approached me with the intention of deceiving me for my wealth. No one cares about a secretary. Follow our way. Matthew said such things. I knew Lisa had thought that way, but I didn't expect Matthew to think the same. Why do you think that? I'm not a secretary. Mom said so. He muttered, and I sighed. In case you've forgotten, I'm the CEO of this company. When I told him, he was stunned. James should have explained that when he introduced Matthew to me. That's a lie. There's no way you earn more than me. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm. As I resisted, saying, Let go! That's enough. Someone grabbed his hand. It was Brian, the lawyer who had been helping me. I had planned to meet him later to discuss the alimony. Enough already! You're the worst! He scolded Matthew. While Matthew was startled, I shook off his arm. What are you doing? Eventually, the police, called by someone else, took Matthew away. Brian watched the scene closely. It's all right now. Brian smiled gently at me after seeing everything through. I couldn't help but feel a spark towards him. After that, Matthew and the others had no choice but to pay the alimony. You're kidding. I'm not paying. Karen resisted until the end, but things didn't go her way. James made sure she paid. They haven't fulfilled their role as parents, so they should at least do this, he said with a meaningful smile. I had known since my time training under him that he was a shrewd businessman. With his connections, escaping would be difficult. But how did you make them pay? Karen was a housewife. They barely managed to live on my aid and Matthew's earnings. Oh, Dad found her a job. According to Melissa, there were no places willing to hire Karen, who had never really worked. So, they put her in a rather tough job. Well, as long as they paid the alimony, I didn't care what happened to her. What about that man? Matthew also paid up properly. Matthew was arrested by the police once. Since he didn't actually hurt me, he was released soon after. However, his arrest spread the news of this incident throughout the company. I didn't know, but his reputation wasn't very good. Matthew was very two-faced and had deceived most people. However, some competent employees had noticed his tyranny. The divorce story started to reveal the cracks. So, some people were already saying he couldn't be trusted. His arrest confirmed this, and rumors spread. As a result, he was looked down upon and chose to resign voluntarily. He paid the alimony with his severance pay. Then that's okay. Incidentally, he also paid Lisa's share of the alimony. Apparently, his mother had no savings at all. It seems that the reason Matthew's father left was because he got fed up with Lisa doing whatever she pleased. She had been squandering his earnings and couldn't lower her living standards after the divorce. So, she secretly received money from Matthew and barely managed to get by. If that's the case, why did she let Karen live with her? Apparently, she just moved in. Even though Karen was Matthew's ex-girlfriend, she had married another man. However, she was kicked out when it was discovered that Larry and his siblings were not his children. She was also rejected by her own family and ended up at Matthew's parents' house. Lisa liked Karen because she was pretty and close in age to Matthew, so she accepted her. It was also significant that Larry and his siblings were Matthew's children. Well, in the end, they lost everything. I'm looking forward to seeing how far they'll fall from here. I agreed with her words with a smile. A few months later. Jessica, it's been a while. It's been a while. I'm glad to see you're doing well. I met with Larry. Since then, he had been taken in by James and was now living separately. My old dad came to see me. Karen's ex-husband seemed to love the children even though they weren't his biological kids. So, after receiving a call from James, he met with them. We can't live together, but he said we're still his important kids. Due to having another family, they couldn't live together. However, he promised to visit regularly. That's great, Larry. Yeah. He smiled happily. When he was at his parents' house, he always looked so apologetic. I was glad to see this change in him. Thanks to you, Jessica, I have this life now. Thank you. I smiled at his words and replied. You're welcome. Melissa, who was watching us, also smiled gently. In fact, Melissa initially said, I'll take in those kids. I'll take in those kids. However, she was single. No matter how much she earned, there were many hurdles to overcome in taking in someone else's children. So, her father decided to take them in. I want to become a great successor. He respected James a lot. Even though he was still a child, he was eager to be a successor. Seeing him talk with shining eyes, Melissa and I laughed together. I'm really glad Larry is happy. After parting with him, I murmured that. According to him, the younger siblings were also living happily with James. Feeling relieved, I walked with a high spirit. Jessica! What? I turned around at the voice calling me. There stood Matthew, clearly worn out. You've changed a lot since I last saw you. I was wrong. Please, let's start over. He bowed his head. Then he started talking about his situation on his own. Since we separated, only bad things have happened. After quitting his job, Matthew lost his severance pay and savings paying the alimony for himself and Lisa. Even though he tried to get a new job, rumors about him had spread, and he was rejected everywhere. And yet, my mother kept spending, so we had to take on debt. Matthew spoke through tears. I looked at him coldly. So, you're trying to sponge off me, the CEO? That's not what I mean. But as a CEO, you're making money, right? Oh, but according to you and your mother, I'm just a secretary. I smiled at him. Sorry, but a secretary can't pay off debts or provide support. You'll have to manage on your own. My words made Matthew lose his strength and slump his shoulders. In the meantime, I hailed a taxi and got in. Please drive. I quickly left him behind. That was the last time I saw him. Later, I heard through the grapevine that he was caught by debt collectors and put on a ship bound for overseas. As for Lisa, she fell down the stairs and became bedridden. Looks like they got what they deserved. I murmured upon hearing their fates. Well, let's do our best at work today. Take it easy. You have a tendency to overwork, Jessica. I nodded at Brian's gentle smile. We had grown closer since that incident and were now married. Unlike Matthew, Brian was genuinely kind, and I was living a happy life with him. Oh, by the way, today. I know, you're meeting Melissa, right? My friendship with Melissa remained unchanged. We regularly had meals together and deepened our bond. But if you feel unwell, call me. I'll come get you right away. You're not just looking out for yourself anymore. Brian gently touched my stomach. Yes, I was carrying a new life inside me. When I was with Matthew, I never thought about having children. But now, I was truly happy to be expecting a child with Brian. Yes, please take care of me if that happens. Melissa and Larry were also happy about my pregnancy. Grateful for everyone around me, I smiled at the happiness in my daily life.
Seats aren't available for non-family, so you'll just have to stand. When I went to a restaurant to celebrate my grandson Tyler's milestone celebration, I found that there clearly wasn't a seat for me as we entered the designated room. As I exchanged glances with the relatives who had arrived at the venue at the same time, a shocking statement was thrown at me by Nicole, the wife of my eldest son, Roger. Although I initially felt a rush of anger, a tap on the shoulder from my brother Philip calmed me down, and I found myself saying, "I guess we should head home then?" To my surprise, everyone present immediately responded with, "Yes," to my question, prompting us to make a U-turn on the spot. Despite hearing shouts and the loud noise of breaking dishes from behind, I ignored them and headed home, where I immediately took a certain action. My name is Marie, a 54-year-old office worker. I work for a company that operates multiple restaurant locations, and although I am officially listed as a store advisor, I mostly work from home. This is partly because I was born with a handicap in one leg, and though I don't use a wheelchair, I cannot walk without the aid of a cane. This makes me hesitant to go out to crowded downtown areas or use public transportation. Embarrassingly, I don't visit the restaurants my company operates very often. Of course, I'm fully aware that this isn't good. However, since losing my husband Simon suddenly to illness 2 years ago, my life has felt devoid of any excitement. Now, I live alone in a smaller condominium arranged for me by my brother Philip, after giving the condominium where I lived with Simon to my married son and his wife about 3 years ago. Some people ask if I'm lonely, but when weighing the freedom of being alone against the loneliness, the appeal of living freely wins out. Part of this is because my relationship with my son's wife, Nicole, is the worst. Nicole is 8 years younger than my son, Roger, currently 24. She is stylish, beautiful, and was popular as an active college student model while attending a prestigious university. I've heard she appeared on TV several times. She was expected to become a news reporter with the title of Miss University, but she got pregnant with Roger's child during the summer of her junior year, and they had a shotgun wedding. Initially, she took a leave of absence from college with the intention of returning after giving birth, but she suffered from severe morning sickness and deteriorated health. Nicole, worried that her beauty would be ruined, threw a tantrum saying, "I don't want to be seen in public looking like this," and dropped out of college. At the same time, she became irritable over her uncontrollable physical condition and started behaving hysterically towards my son Roger. "Mom, please. No matter what I do, thinking it's for the best, Nicole just screams and rejects everything. The house is a mess, and it's bad for the baby's prenatal environment. I need your help," begged Roger. So, my husband and I decided to live with our son and his wife in the large condominium we had bought, intending to live there until we died. However, living together turned out to be challenging, as Nicole treated me like a servant with her haughty attitude. "Don't dawdle. Bring me my smoothie and crackers to bed quickly. Haven't I told you numerous times how sick I feel if I wake up with an empty stomach because of my morning sickness?" she would yell. And when she wasn't yelling about that, "Why are you washing my clothes with your old hag's clothes? No matter how expensive the fabric softener is, it won't keep it from the old hag's smell transferring to my clothes," she would screech so. Simon, seeing enough, would scold her firmly. "Is it common sense in this house to harass a pregnant woman?" But she would just snap back. Even when Simon suggested that Roger talk to her, "It's impossible. Nothing makes sense to Nicole right now. I wish you could just deal with it, Mom." he would say, laughing it off. As infuriating as it was, the fact that Nicole was pregnant made it so we had no choice but to endure her behavior. Had Simon been his usual self, perhaps he could have taken a firmer stand against Nicole and Roger. But looking back, Simon's body was probably already being slowly ravaged by disease at that time. Nicole had cluttered Simon's study and living room, which should have been his places of relaxation after hard work, with her beauty devices, leaving no space to rest. Even trying to soak in the large bathtub we had ordered to relieve his fatigue. Taking a bath with that old bugger gives me the chills. Just use the shower stall instead. I was met with such verbal abuse. Yet, Simon, arguing with those two just tires me out more, he said, deciding it was best to just endure it himself. Seeing Simon's attitude, Nicole and Roger, far from reflecting, escalated their tyrannical behavior even further. Even as I busily managed the household chores, dragging my ailing leg around, they paid no mind. I never want to end up like that disgraceful old hag, no matter how old I get, she said, dissing me to the visiting beautician while pointing at me. The beautician was at a loss for words at the sheer nastiness of their comments, but she didn't care. We really wanted to hire a younger servant, but you know how hard it is to find someone reliable these days, right? So we settled, she declared. Even as these words were spoken, I continued my chores in silence, my leg aching, my heart full of anger towards Nicole and Roger. As these days went on, Nicole's due date arrived, and she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Holding his first grandson, named Tyler, Simon teared up a bit when the tiny hand tightly grasped his finger. Seeing this, I nearly cried myself. The innocent smile of the baby made me want to wash away all resentments and negative feelings. But that thought was short-lived when suddenly I received news that Simon had collapsed at work. Panicked, I rushed to the hospital while trying to contact Roger on his mobile phone, but it remained unread, with no return call. Reluctantly, I asked the company to contact him on his work-issued mobile phone. But that too was in vain, with no response. Hoping at least to let Simon see his grandson Tyler, I contacted Nicole's mobile phone. I asked her to bring Tyler to the hospital, but I'm in the middle of a hair treatment at the salon, so it's impossible. She laughed and refused. Then I'll come to the salon to pick up Tyler myself. Do you really think I'd entrust a baby to an old hag who can barely walk with a cane? With that, she hung up the phone. Still, I didn't give up and kept calling Nicole and Roger's mobile phones. But in the midst of this, the operating room light went off. Then, the doctor came out and informed me that Simon had just passed away. My memories of the time that followed are a complete blank. All I can recall is a hazy scene, as if viewed through frosted glass. After the funeral, which took place amid this haze, I came down with the flu. Nicole, the baby might catch it, which would be terrible, exclaimed dramatically, and told me to leave the house immediately. Already emotionally damaged by Simon's sudden departure and physically weakened by fever and cough, I had no energy left to argue with hysterical Nicole. Barely managing to get dressed, I left the room but collapsed in the entrance of the elevator hall. Thankfully, the concierge called an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital. According to the doctors, I was on the verge of pneumonia. Later, my brother and his wife and my nephew Urban, having heard of my condition, took care of everything. There's no need to visit the hospital. She's been admitted. She's safe. There's nothing to do there, and it would be terrible if the baby caught something, Roger and Nicole said, not even bothering to visit. Outraged by their attitude, my nephew and his wife, even if you return to the condo after being discharged, you'll just be exploited by Nicole again, suggested I stay with them for a while instead. Indeed, returning to the condo would mean resuming a servant-like existence before even regaining my strength. However, Staying at my brother Philip's house, where my sister-in-law's parents lived, was not an option due to infection prevention concerns, making my nephew's offer a welcome one. Deciding to accept their kind offer, I planned to first return to the condo to retrieve Simon's photos and personal items left behind. My nephew Urban's wife Olive, who was worried about the situation, decided to come with me. And when we visited the condominium for the first time in about a month, we found it in a terrible state. What is this mess? Dirty glasses and dishes are piled up, and the garbage disposal is clogged. What a horrible smell! The living room was no different, with delivery food containers scattered everywhere. The bathrooms and bath were in a dire state as well. I wondered how they could raise a baby in such filth. As Olive and I stood there in disbelief, Nicole, apparently already drunk, though it was just past 2 p.m., returned with a couple of friends. Noticing us standing in the living room, turned into a garbage house. Nicole looked surprised for a moment, but then quickly put on her usual smirking face and said, "So you're finally back. Then get to cleaning this room right away." It got all messy because the old hag slacked off. Olive was furious at this brazen attitude. She quickly approached Nicole and said, "How dare you speak to Roger's mom like that? After all she has done for you, and you just kicked her out the moment she got the flu," and retorted sharply. But Nicole and her friends just laughed it off. Birds of a feather flock together. Friends of unreasonable people are, unsurprisingly, unreasonable themselves. Then, as if they had a great idea, "Why don't you just leave for good? This place is going to be Roger's through inheritance anyway. The old hag can just go back to her parents' house," they said. As Olive grew even angrier, I somehow remained calm. Considering their outrageous behavior so far, it was only a matter of time before Nicole and the others would try to drive me out. There was no reason for me to stay any longer with such unpleasant people. So I called Urban to ask for help, and we managed to move out all my personal belongings that had sentimental value that day. Still, when I look back at the condominium for the last time, the memory of deciding this house would be where I die, Simon's smiling face when we made that decision, brushed my heart. I'm sure Simon would understand this decision. I felt certain. After that, I moved into a condominium near my parents' home that Philip had arranged for me, and returned to my job, which had been on hold since before Simon passed away. I also adopted a rescue cat, which I couldn't have before due to Simon's allergy, and started living with it. Though Roger and I work at the same company and see each other when I go to the office, we hardly ever talk. However, one day, I received an unusual message from Roger. Curious about the sudden contact, I read the message. It was about planning a milestone celebration for Tyler at a restaurant this coming weekend. It seems Nicole has invited a large number of guests, including her parents, relatives, and friends. The balance will be off if no one from our side of the family attends, he said, wanting to invite me and the relatives. Why don't you ask Simon's side of the family then? I suggested, but it seems they had already refused. Indeed, Simon's relatives live quite far away, and it's not a distance easily traveled back and forth. Moreover, today is already Friday, and there's hardly any time to prepare to leave the house. It's understandable that they refused. I was about to refuse again when Roger, sensing my hesitation, "I'm sorry for everything that's happened. For Tyler's sake, could you consider our request?" Though I was indeed angry with Roger and Nicole, Tyler himself is innocent. Remembering how happy Simon was about Tyler's birth, I didn't want to spoil the celebration. After hanging up and giving it some thought, I decided to attend and sent Roger a message to that effect. On the day, my brother and his wife, my nephew and his wife, my uncle and aunt, their children, and other relatives gathered in front of the restaurant. But Olive said, "I'm here today not for that couple, but for Marie." While calming her down, we were led to the room, the largest in the restaurant, with low tables and chairs. This setup would make it difficult for me, with my mobility issues, to take a seat. Thinking this, I asked the staff who had shown us in for a chair that was a bit taller. However, Nicole interrupted. "There's no extra seat, so just stand," she said loudly, with her arms crossed. Seeing Nicole's smirking face, I felt more dumbfounded than angry, wondering how she could be so mean even now. Then, impulsively, I called out to my relatives standing, "Shall we go back home then?" Without hesitation, "Yes." They all responded. The guests on Nicole's side became unsettled by this. Parting the crowd, Nicole's parents came forward, apologizing to me and my brother and his wife while hurriedly scolding Nicole. But Nicole, scolded in front of her relatives and acquaintances, became angry and started throwing anything she could get her hands on, like vases, framed pictures, and dishes. Screams, shouts, and the sound of things breaking filled the room, but we left without paying any further attention. Once the relatives and I had left the restaurant, Philip and I decided to hold a strategy meeting in preparation for what was to come. The company where I, the late Simon, and Roger worked was originally built by my grandfather. It's a family-owned business where our relatives own more than half of all shares, with my real brother Philip currently serving as the CEO. Simon was Philip's close friend since college and joined the company at Philip's request after graduating. He married a woman who was a clerk there and had a son, Roger. But after a long illness, his wife passed away when Roger was in the 8th grade. Philip, seeing Simon juggling work and home life alone, suggested I marry him, probably concerned about my future due to my disability and lack of social connections. Initially hesitant, "I'm a single father with a child, but I intend to take good care of you. Would you become part of our family?" I was swayed by Simon's words. Roger, who became my stepson, neither showed hostility nor warmth towards me, his new stepmother. Believing it was unreasonable to expect more from Roger so soon after losing his mom, I resolved to do my best as a stepmother. When Roger was about to graduate from college, "I want to work at the same company as Dad and Mom," he said, which moved me to tears. However, this peaceful period ended when Roger had a shotgun wedding with Nicole. After living with Nicole for a while, I couldn't ignore her domineering behavior and decided to have Roger firmly speak to his wife. I waited for Roger in the company's underground parking lot, but what appeared was Roger with his arm around a married colleague, unaware I was standing just a pillar away, getting intimately close. The shock was enough, but Roger then told the woman, "What if someone sees us here? We'd both get fired." To which he confidently replied, "I won't make such a mistake, and even if my affair gets exposed, the company can't fire me. After all, I'm the president's stepnephew." Unaware of my shocked state, Roger continued, "My real mom was just a country girl, but my stepmother, even if just in name, is the company's executive vice president and the granddaughter of the founder, so she owns a significant share of the stocks and assets. When she passes, all of that will be mine." Then, he drove off with the woman. Overwhelmed by what I had just heard, I returned home, unable to tell Simon, replaying Roger's words in my head. Gradually, I understood why Nicole always spoke so disdainfully of me, and why Roger never reprimanded her. It was as if peeling back layers to reveal the truth. Nicole likely received a similar explanation from the beginning of their marriage. And I'm just a stepmother, after all, believing I'm merely a tool they can treat however they please until they inherit the estate. Both Roger and the grandchild yet to be born, since we're all strangers to one another. That's why they feel it's okay to treat me with disdain. But there's a truth neither Nicole nor Roger himself understands. In reality, Roger and I haven't gone through an adoption process. Legally, Roger is nothing more than Simon's stepchild, with no right to inherit my estate. Needless to say, for Philip, being a CEO, Roger is nothing more than a step-nephew, if even that. Recovering from the shock, I immediately consulted with Philip, Urban, and Olive. Following their advice, I took steps at the City Hall to ensure no unauthorized adoption could take place. Additionally, in case of any eventuality, I arranged to entrust the management of my personal assets to a lawyer, a process that was nearly completed when Simon passed away before me. Simon's own estate, having been mostly spent on his first wife's illness, consisted of little more than savings and life insurance, which I quickly renounced. The reason the condominium wasn't discussed during the inheritance talks is because it was never part of the estate to begin with. Yet it's truly frightening how greed can blind people. Roger and Nicole, thinking that condominium was Simon's, probably rushed to kick me out after I renounced the inheritance. The reason I quietly backed down was not just because I wasn't in the best of health, but I also pitied young Tyler, not wanting to disrupt his living situation drastically. But this time, I've reached my limit. Originally, I intended to file for an eviction due to illegal occupancy of the condominium during the milestone celebration, so I promptly began the process with my lawyer. Nicole's parents dragged her daughter to the company to apologize. We were told by Nicole that we shouldn't visit because she needed to get along with the family of the person she married, that the birth and everything would be managed by Roger's family since an heir is being born, and we took her word for it. We had no idea things had come to this. We're truly sorry. No sooner had they been let into the living room than they apologized over and over, but it was too late for regrets. Hearing the commotion, Roger also came running. I had no idea my wife could be this unreasonable. I truly am sorry for what I've done to Mom. But when Nicole started crying, and he said to her, "We're getting a divorce. Take the kid and get out of that condominium." The look he gave me, almost groveling, truly sent shivers down my spine. Seeing my reaction, Philip looked at Roger with a cold gaze and said, "You know that store is part of our company's chain, right? Considering the fuss you've made, you'll both be paying for the damages. As for you, stay home until you receive an official summons from the company," and firmly kicked everyone out of the reception room. Afterward, Philip, my brother, began preparations to fire Roger, consulting the company's legal advisor. Right after the milestone celebration incident, he was furious, saying, "Not only is Nicole's disgraceful behavior appalling, but Roger's negligence in letting her run wild is just as bad. They even destroyed store fixtures and decor. Firing him is only natural, right?" Though he was initially adamant about firing him immediately, the other executives calmed him down, explaining that a disciplinary dismissal made in anger could disadvantage us in a lawsuit. So we turned to a law firm, introduced to us as being filled with capable lawyers, on a recommendation. True to their reputation, they did an excellent job, providing indisputable evidence that was more than sufficient to fire Roger. A week later, Roger, having been temporarily relieved from house arrest, was summoned to the head office meeting room, seemingly prepared for his dismissal, perhaps having gathered some inside information. Despite arriving with a lawyer, the sheer number of attendees overwhelmed him. But as Philip, sitting at the center of the board, began, "It goes without saying why we've called you here today. Your dismissal has been decided." Roger braced himself, clenching his fists. "Mr. Roger Miller, you are hereby dismissed." As Philip, acting as president, began reading the notice of dismissal to Roger, his lawyer immediately, "I object. My client admits to the troubles with his stepmother, Marie, but insists that connecting this to his dismissal is wrongful termination." A voice rose. Glancing at Roger beside him, he seemed quite pleased, nodding in agreement. As soon as the lawyer finished speaking, "There's no excuse for my ex-wife's rudeness at the recent milestone celebration, but that was a private matter. Isn't it wrong to fire me over it?" he argued. Then, conspicuously placing a voice recorder on the desk, "I'm also prepared to report this as harassment to the media, if necessary." he said with a smug face. Hearing this, Philip and the other executives remained silent, and Roger, mistaking their silence for victory. You're aware of the public backlash against companies that violate compliance, right? Are you sure you want to fire me, knowing what will happen? Provoked further. At this point, Roger's lawyer, not showing the expected signs of disturbance, but rather a hint of a smirk, seemed puzzled. Yet, Roger, ever so confident, failed to notice. Philip then asked, in a voice 2 octaves deeper than usual, "Oh, so you wish to continue working with us? That's a hard pass. However, if you wish for me to leave the company amicably, a certain amount of money as a settlement would be necessary," Roger said, leaning forward on the desk with a smirk, as if to challenge the surrounding executives. But in the next moment, laughter erupted spontaneously from everyone present. Some were even laughing so hard that tears formed at the corners of their eyes. Taken aback by their reaction, Roger quickly turned red and began cursing foully. His lawyer frantically tried to calm him down, but the dismissal notice naturally includes the reasons for dismissal. I'll explain them now, and if you have any objections, we can discuss them afterward, Philip declared, his presence overpowering Roger and his lawyer into silence, both sitting down. Then, a group in dark suits stepped forward, bowed slightly, and turned on the electronic blackboard in the center of the meeting room. Immediately, the screen displayed screenshots of pages where wine, exclusively imported for group participation restaurants, was being sold on an online marketplace. Next, the screen showed an enlarged photo of the wine seller's icon. The moment it was displayed, Roger stood up quickly. "This isn't me!" he exclaimed in desperation, turning pale. And for good reason. The photo used for the icon was a cropped selfie of Roger. The screen neatly displayed the original photos alongside, with an image match rate of 100% written in red. Facing the lawyer, still unable to grasp the situation, a man from the group of dark suits stepped forward, introducing themselves as the law firm hired by the company. "Let me explain the reasons for the dismissal notice. The reasons include embezzlement, harassment, and undue pressure within the workplace, using his executive position, leaking confidential company information, unauthorized absences, tardiness, loafing, and damaging the company's reputation through inappropriate use of a company car," he smoothly explained, further adding that the company's legal and accounting departments had been secretly investigating rumors of the wine, supposed to be sold exclusively in stores, being traded online. In the process, they identified the source account and, collaborating with the police and other relevant parties, discovered that the account was linked to Roger's online banking account. Additionally, the inventory management department uncovered the existence of double books. Upon questioning, several employees confessed that they had been coerced into participating in the illegal activities by Roger, who implied they would be fired if they did not comply. As this explanation unfolded, Roger was sweating profusely, but his complexion turned even paler at the next images displayed. It was a video seemingly taken secretly with a mobile phone, capturing Roger as he subjected female interns and temporary staff to sexual harassment and unbearable words. Roger's lawyer, standing by, couldn't take his eyes off the repeating video, mouth agape. Next shown were images of customer information meant for our company being sold to a rival company, and a USB drive containing original recipes, alongside an envelope bearing the name of the rival company's legal counsel. Seeing this, Roger's face turned from pale to ashen, and his hands trembled on the desk. Our lawyer continued without hesitation, explaining why the USB was transferred from the rival company. Actually, suspicions about the source of this confidential information had arisen even before it was utilized. Upon rechecking the acquisition method, it was found that an employee of the rival company had obtained it from Mr. Roger Miller in exchange for a significant amount of cash. He explained, The rival company quickly dealt with the involved employee and returned the data to us, along with documents clarifying the factual situation. Roger's lawyer, taken aback by the continuous revelation of Roger's misdeeds, listened in stunned silence. However, our lawyer concluded with, while it might seem superfluous to mention now, all these illegal activities have already led to the filing of criminal complaints. Perhaps, instead of discussing settlement money, you should be preparing for a criminal defense? He said this with a chilling laugh, leaving Roger's lawyer red-faced. I've heard nothing of this from my client. I cannot represent him under these circumstances. I resign, he exclaimed, glaring at Roger before storming out of the room. Left alone, Roger's initial bravado disappeared, and he slumped in his chair. Before he knew it, the women he had harassed in the video lined up in front of him. We will be filing for damages as well, and firmly declared. Adding insult to injury, our lawyer continued. Moreover, it has been confirmed through social media posts that you've been unfaithful with multiple women using company resources, even during work hours, and engaged in inappropriate actions in public. The company will, of course, include these actions in its claims for damages, so please be prepared for that, he stated, not a smile in his eyes, but speaking pleasantly. Roger finally collapsed from his chair, sitting on the floor in defeat. As Philip and the lawyer had declared, Roger was swiftly dismissed for misconduct. In the investigation that followed, Roger, who was interrogated for embezzlement, tried to negotiate a settlement to avoid a prison sentence. However, finding a willing lawyer proved difficult, and he struggled to even pay the retainer fees. Eventually, he managed to cover the lawyer's fees and compensation payments using the inheritance from his father, avoiding jail time for embezzlement. Yet, unable to prepare for the compensation claims for leaking confidential information, the emotional damages claimed by the women, and the defamation lawsuits, Roger found himself buried in debt. Nicole, understandably furious at being quickly discarded by Roger for his own protection, filed for asset division, damages, and child support. In a defiant stance, Roger demanded, "Then, let's have a DNA test for the child," prioritizing the investigation of paternity over financial concerns. Confidently agreeing, Nicole was shocked when the results showed the child wasn't Roger's biological offspring. Investigations by a detective hired by Roger revealed Nicole had multiple partners at the time of their shotgun marriage, one of whom was the biological father, disproving any parental relationship between Roger and the child. However, legally, Tyler was still considered Roger's child. Knowing he couldn't escape from the obligation of child support, Roger initiated mediation to confirm the absence of a parental relationship. While a lengthy resolution was expected, the public exposure of Nicole's turbulent private life in court was something her parents wanted to avoid at all costs, leading to an explosive reaction. "Stop bringing shame upon us. Enough with your antics," they demanded, forcing Nicole to withdraw all claims for asset division, damages, and child support. Then Nicole, for reasons known only to her, demanded of Winston, "You're the father of this child, so you should acknowledge paternity and pay child support." The biological father of her child. Winston, who was married, refused to acknowledge the child for fear his wife would find out. He did offer to pay some child support, but Nicole, unsatisfied, took the child and confronted Winston at his home while he was away. "Don't you think it's terrible that your child and mine, sharing the same father, aren't acknowledged and don't receive proper child support?" she boldly stated. Winston's wife, caught off guard by this revelation and already dissatisfied with her husband, who had been adopted into her family, promptly divorced him. She transferred all desirable assets, including a new house, savings, and stocks, into her name before kicking Winston out with nothing. Initially, Nicole smirked at Winston's divorce, thinking she could be the next wife, but upon learning he had lost all his assets, and was ousted from his father-in-law's company. Becoming unemployed, she quickly withdrew, despite the cause being his own infidelity. Winston felt his happiness had been destroyed and blamed Nicole. All of this is her fault. Ever since then, he has been relentlessly pursuing Nicole wherever she hides. Terrified by his obsession, Nicole's parents, to avoid collateral damage, took in only their grandson Tyler and disowned Nicole, kicking her out of their home. Left with nowhere to go and no one to turn to, Nicole resorted to night work to support Winston, now a drunk and unemployed, as I was informed by a detective I had hired for a follow-up investigation. Meanwhile, Roger, after all the trials had concluded, was left with a mountain of debt and alimony payments. A claim from me for the restoration costs of the condominium seemed to be the final blow. Trying to make a comeback proved futile, as he couldn't find stable employment and resorted to juggling short-term jobs, inevitably falling behind on repayments. There was a time when he possibly couldn't afford a mobile phone and called from a public phone, pleading, "Please, I need help." But the call ended in silence after I remained quiet. Rumors suggest he was last seen being taken to a worksite by barely legal debt collectors, but his whereabouts since then remain unknown. As for myself, taking this experience into account, I've become more actively involved in work. I used to think of myself as a decorative executive, a burden to my family, contributing nothing. However, during this ordeal, the company's female employees encouraged me. Even with accessible stores, its true usability can't be known without directly asking the users. Marie, you could surely bridge that gap. Have more confidence in yourself. Getting more involved in on-site work made me realize I had become a pro at finding reasons for why I can't do this, or that's impossible. Regretting not realizing this sooner, I'm now 54 with 11 years left until retirement. Rather than mourning the irretrievable past, I'm determined to make the most of these next 11 years. My current goal is to earn an extension of my retirement from Philip and our relatives, and to report this achievement to Simon, who has passed away.
Hey, how much of your father-in-law's inheritance is coming my way? Dan, my husband, uttered these greed-filled words behind my back. It was right after we had finally finished the funeral of my dad, Elton, the only family I had, who had suddenly passed away. Instead of comforting me, who was drowning in sorrow, Dan casually started talking about money. Dad was a famous lawyer who often appeared in the media and probably made a substantial income. Dan and I had a good relationship at the beginning of our marriage, and he never mentioned any desire for my dad's status or wealth. However, things started to change drastically within months. He stopped doing housework, slacked off at work, lowering his evaluation at the company, and started drinking daily, often coming to work hungover. Eventually, he became so negligent that he would miss work without notice. It seemed he had grown complacent because of my dad's money. And now, with my dad gone, Dan had finally shown his true colors. The way he trampled on my feelings of loneliness and mourning brought on an overwhelming sadness and a rage that bubbled up from the depths of my stomach. Lying face down on the bed, I told him without even looking in his eyes, "There's no inheritance. I'm the child of my mom who passed away long ago, a stepdaughter. I'm not a real family member, so I can't inherit anything. $0. Dan's face turned pale all at once. "Lies! Stepdaughter? I've never heard such a thing before." As I spoke calmly, Dan suddenly yelled so loudly it echoed throughout the room. You tricked me! I was looking forward to the inheritance knowing your dad was a famous lawyer. I married an ugly old hag like you for nothing. I'm divorcing you right away." He was screaming furiously, smashing everything on the table to the floor. Stuffed animals, a photo frame from our wedding, a mirror we bought on a trip, memories of our time together shattered into pieces with loud noises. Was this the true feeling of the man I loved, with whom I shared many happy times when we first met? A mix of disappointment and disillusionment, I collapsed, powerless. I couldn't let Dan see the unstoppable smile that was about to break through. My name is Christy. I'm a 36-year-old working for a cosmetics company. My husband's name is Dan. He's 5 years younger than me, and we met at the gym we both attended. Both Dan and I work in sales at different companies. My dad was a famous lawyer who often appeared in the media, praised as Elton, the lawyer you'd definitely want to consult. Of course, his sales and assets seemed to be quite substantial. My existence never became widely known to the public since my family never appeared in the media, but still, people around us would notice. Neighbors, acquaintances, friends, and coworkers often mentioned my dad, given his prominence. The fact that Dad was wealthy led many to mistakenly think I was financially comfortable, attracting those who were after the money. By my 20s, I was already fed up with this situation. Although I had a few boyfriends, it became clear that they were all ultimately interested in my dad's wealth. As our relationships deepened, they would say things like, "I'd like to be introduced to Elton," or "If we get married, Elton will support us, right?" Each time, I ended up breaking off the relationship. It was always about Dad. No one saw me for me. Dan approached me when I was feeling particularly jaded. He would always talk about the gym or everyday things, never once bringing up my dad during our dates. When we discussed our families, his attitude was perfectly normal. He might not even know about my dad. He seemed genuinely happy talking to me, enjoying meals at affordable restaurants or visiting theme parks, just like any normal couple would. Just being with Christy makes me incredibly happy. Seeing you smile by my side fills me with joy. I admire that you never slack off, whether it's work, hobbies, or improving your skills. While eating delivery pizza at his place, Dan said that to me. I want to enjoy lots of things together with you in the future. Would you like to be my girlfriend? Having gradually opened up to him over our dates, his words warmed my heart. This person saw me. With him, I could share a life of mutual support. Tears welled up in my eyes as the pizza in my mouth tasted suddenly salty yet somehow sweet. Thank you. I'm very happy with you too. Please, let's be together. He lovingly supported me as I cried uncontrollably. There were no demands for dining at fancy restaurants that hinted at my wealth, nor any eagerness to assess my family home as if appraising it. We found genuine happiness in each other's modest living spaces, sharing simple meals or delivery pizza. Filled with a sense of security, I instinctively hugged him. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and he never showed any interest in my family background. After 3 years of a very normal relationship, we got engaged. Naturally, meeting each other's parents was unavoidable. I was quite nervous about inviting him to my family home. Since he seemed unaware of my dad's identity, I feared he might get scared off upon finding out. As we waited in the living room for my parents, Dad appeared and introduced himself, causing Dan to react with surprise. Wait, are you the Elton, the lawyer everyone wants to consult who appears on TV every week? Dan's jaw dropped in astonishment, and Dad burst into hearty laughter. Haha, yes, I am that lawyer. It's the first time someone has come this far with Christy without knowing me. This is quite something. Dan, still laughing, apologized to Dad, looking somewhat embarrassed. I'm sorry. I'm a bit clueless. Christy didn't exactly spell it out for me. To be honest, I haven't taken her to any fancy places on our dates. I'm really sorry for being disrespectful to both Christy and Elton. Dad, smiling continuously, responded. That's all right. You're in a relationship with, and marrying, Christy, not me. My daughter's life is her own. You don't need to worry about me at all. The most important thing is that you two support each other and live a life filled with happiness. Dad's demeanor was gentle yet dignified, reflecting the depth of his life experience and humanity, shaped by handling various difficult cases as a lawyer and his extensive work in the media. Dan seemed moved by Dad's words, his eyes sparkling as he straightened up. Yes, I may not be able to achieve as much as Elton or may seem unreliable because I'm younger, but I will do my utmost to make Christy happy. Dad watched us warmly. A few months later, we managed to have our wedding and got married successfully. Some relatives commented that the wedding was small for the daughter of a well-known lawyer, but that was because Dan and I wanted to have a charming, intimate ceremony with our closest family and friends. We moved into a condominium together and started our married life as a couple. We moved into a condominium to start our married life, living modestly and happily together. What kind of life would we lead? I wanted to travel together and someday have children. Aiming for a happy future, I wanted us to steadily make our way forward together. That's what I thought. But perhaps I was the only one thinking that way. A few months into our marriage, I began to notice a change in Dan's behavior. He used to help with household chores during nights and weekends, but recently he wouldn't even take care of his own things. Clothes were left strewn about, dishes were left on the table instead of being put in the sink. Before, he would have gone out to buy necessities as soon as we ran out. "Hey, we're out of milk!" But now he would just roughly tell me. And what shocked me the most was his reckless spending. He used to invest in himself by going to the gym and didn't splurge on meals or outings. As we talked about in front of Dad, the places we chose to go out to were often more affordable. That's why the joy was all the more special when he splurged a little for our anniversary. Yet now, he would casually buy expensive watches on non-special days or reserve tables at Michelin-starred restaurants he'd never taken me to, just to go drinking with friends. It was too much to overlook, so I get wanting to splurge, but are we okay financially? When I asked, "Now that I'm married, I have to spend generously to show some presents," he responded vaguely, saying things like, "We need to save for when we have children, and it's troubling if you keep splurging on yourself." Even when cautioned, "It'll be fine. We'll manage somehow." Such was his irresponsibly casual response. It was around this time that I was growing weary of Dan's lackadaisical attitude. Both his company and mine were businesses that provided a bonus as extra income during this period. There was no significant change in my bonus. If anything, it had slightly increased, perhaps as a recognition of my daily efforts. The problem was with Dan's bonus. The figures on his statement were one digit less than expected. Dan looked a bit upset, and when asked, "It's reduced to about a third of what it was last time." That's what he said. There haven't been any reports of significant declines in the performance of the industry or the company he works for. It was clear that the assessment was due to an issue with him personally. "Thinking about it, you've been out drinking a lot lately and coming home late. There were times you went to work hungover or overslept and were late to the office. Maybe these habits have piled up and affected your work?" I asked carefully, choosing my words, but essentially, it came down to his work attitude becoming more careless since we got married. From his daily behavior, his attitude towards work naturally becomes apparent. Given Dan's habit of constantly being late due to fooling around, it's hard to believe he could be performing well at work. "Is that so? The company seems to be struggling too, but maybe my numbers will go back to normal next time." Despite my worries, Yudo's response was as if it were someone else's problem. There was no indication he intended to improve his lifestyle or work attitude, even with such a decrease in his bonus. Just a few weeks after that incident, one day, Dan skipped work without notice. As usual, he must have come home late at night after drinking, because even when I tried to wake him up several times the next morning, he wouldn't get up. "I don't care anymore." I left those words behind and headed to my own job, but in the end, Dan never did get up on his own to go to work that day. Moreover, he apparently continued to sleep in bed all day without even bothering to contact his workplace. When I returned home and saw Dan still in bed, just as he was in the morning, I was stunned. "Did you really miss work without telling anyone?" Outraged by his irresponsible behavior as both a husband and a professional, I couldn't help but raise my voice. "I couldn't wake up. The company called, so I took the day off." Unbelievable. The company, concerned about his absence, had taken the trouble to contact him. He had inconvenienced his workplace, leaving a gap in his responsibilities, and showed no sign of remorse. I felt hopeless facing this changed Dan, who seemed like a different person from the man I married. "So, you're skipping work without notice now? What will you do if you get fired for something like this?" I raised my voice, worried about his future, our future. The next words out of Dan's mouth were shocking. "Then, we can just borrow money from your dad." In that moment, everything went dark before me. When had he become someone who relied on my dad's wealth? He had promised my dad to build a happy life with me, supporting each other. He used to say he was happy just being with me, enjoying our modest life. I felt foolish for believing we could be happy together. Now, it seems he's with me just for the money after all. This makes him no different from the people in my past. Do people inevitably get blinded by money? Was introducing him to my dad before our marriage a mistake? Disappointment, regret, despair, and sorrow overwhelmed me. If things continued this way, divorce might become an option. Although he stopped missing work without notice after receiving a serious warning from his company, he didn't quit his extravagant nightlife or wasteful spending. When he impulsively bought luxury brand shoes and bags without thinking, I felt fear for what might become of him. Living with this uncertainty, months passed by. Then one day, suddenly, my dad passed away. It wasn't due to an accident or incident, but a sudden illness. Naturally, Dad's professional circle and the media were in uproar, and my life became instantly busier. Having lost my mom long ago and without any siblings, my dad was my only family. I barely had time to mourn until after the funeral was over, but once everything settled, a profound sense of loss and sadness hit me. My dad, who raised me as a single father amidst his busy professional and media career, always remained calm and wise, and he was my lifelong role model. In moments of despair during exams or job hunting, I was encouraged by the sight of my dad's back, never sparing effort or learning in anything. He passed away too soon at 66. Left alone, I was grieving in my room when Dan barged in without knocking. He had barely helped with the funeral arrangements, mostly just fiddling with his smartphone in a corner while I was busy organizing everything. I had reached a point of resignation towards him and didn't even bother to scold him at that moment. As I was crying, hunched over on my bed, Dan didn't even squat down to meet my gaze but instead stood and said, "Hey, how much is the inheritance?" It all comes back to money. Disgusted and without responding to his question, he approached me and raised his voice. "How many millions are there? With all that earning, there must be a considerable amount left, right? You're the only next of kin, so we should get something, right?" Even though my wife's dad had passed away, an indecent smirk was playing across his face. It seems he believes that with her dad gone, he's become a billionaire overnight. The thought of living lavishly without working, dangled before him, made me feel a visceral disgust towards his drooling, debased expression. Lying face down on the bed, I told him without even looking at him. "There's no inheritance." Immediately, Dan shouted, "That's impossible! He died suddenly. There's no way all the money's gone." "That's not it. I am the child of a mother who died long ago, a stepdaughter. I'm not a real family member, so I can't inherit anything. $0. Indeed, I have no blood relation to the dad I respected so much. Dad never made our family matters public, partly for reasons like this." "Lies. Stepdaughter? I've never heard anything like that." "It's true that he raised me since I was young and we cared for each other deeply, and my mom has been gone for a long time. I just thought it wasn't necessary to mention." I had nothing more to say to Dan. Instead of asking him to leave, I sighed, and then Dan suddenly yelled so loud it echoed throughout the room. You tricked me! What do you think I've been flattering you and your dad for all these years? Give me back my last few years! What?" I felt as if my heart stopped for a moment. Before I could even ask what he meant, he started furiously smashing everything on the table to the floor. Our memories, including stuffed animals, a photo frame from our wedding, and a mirror we bought on a trip, were shattered one after another with loud noises. "You're so naive, thinking I was some prince who fell for you without knowing about your dad. It was all an act. There was a guy at the gym, recognized you immediately, and told me everything secretly. He said you'd likely be approached by guys after your dad's money, so if I played dumb and feigned true love, you'd fall for it right away." What an appalling revelation. Unlike school or work, where identities are scrutinized, I had let my guard down, never suspecting that someone at the gym could betray my trust. Since no one had ever mentioned my dad at the gym, I believed Dan loved me without knowing about my dad, and I trusted him completely. But he accused me of deceiving him, when in reality, I was the one deceived. Dan clicked his tongue loudly. "Seriously? What are you going to do about this? My life plans are ruined because of you. I played the good guy for 3 years thinking I'd get an inheritance. I wouldn't have bothered with an ugly old hag like you otherwise. His true colors showed as he mercilessly spoke his mind. My disappointment had already reached its limit, and I felt nothing but a cold emptiness inside, lacking the energy to retort. Once the inheritance was secured, I was planning to divorce you. I've been seeing someone else for a year, planning to marry her instead and build a great life with your dad's money. His admission of deceit was followed by a confession of infidelity. I had to respond to that. I lifted my face, opened my eyes wide, and stared intently at his face. What did you just say? A year ago? That's around the time we decided to get married. Yes. It had been about a year since he proposed, and we visited my dad to announce our engagement. You didn't start cheating because we were getting married, did you? Exactly. If I'm to be with someone, it better be someone young and beautiful. I had my eye on this girl for a while. Pretty girls cost money, you know. I couldn't afford her on my salary, so I figured I'd secure the marriage with you. What a meticulously cruel plan. He, and even my dad, were merely pawns for his trivial desires. His nights out with friends and colleagues were actually dates with his mistress. Anger made my heart race. And my fingers began to tremble. Ah, what a loss. If there's no money, you're of no use to me. Let's just get divorced already. He spat out those words dismissively. Facing him, I spoke calmly. That's obvious. Who would want someone who's been lying and cheating all along? Let's divorce as soon as possible. And since you've been unfaithful, I'll be seeking alimony. His reaction to the mention of money was immediate, but he quickly became enraged again. Alimony! I should be the one receiving it, having been deceived all this time. And do you have proof of my cheating to show a lawyer? Any photos? Recordings? You have nothing, right? Despite his provocation, I tried to remain composed. You're right. Without concrete evidence, seeking alimony might be difficult. So, I won't ask for it. There's no inheritance, so no property division either. Just promise never to involve yourself with me or my family ever again. That's enough for me. Dan, with lifeless eyes, said. Fine by me. I never want to deal with you again. With those words, he left the room, slamming the door loudly behind him. Later, we easily finalized our divorce after he signed the divorce papers and a written agreement not to contact me again. Losing both my dad and Dan within days left me feeling empty as I returned to my family home. Dad's presence still lingered in the room he used to live in, and I found myself crying there once more. After taking some time off work due to my dad's passing, I gradually returned to my job and began to adapt to life back at my family home, slowly regaining a sense of normalcy. About 2 weeks later, my mobile phone started ringing incessantly throughout the day. I had to keep it on silent mode and locked away in my locker at work to avoid disturbing others, but the situation was the same at home, disrupting my life. The caller was always Dan. I ignored it for several days, but due to the persistent calls, I decided to answer the phone just once. I figured that once I listened to what they had to say, these incessant calls would finally stop. As soon as I pressed the call button, Dan's furious voice exploded from the other side. You really had me fooled, didn't you? There was an inheritance after all, wasn't there? Why didn't you give it to me? His loud yelling was so unpleasant that I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear. The TV in the room was showing the news, and I glanced at it sideways. It was about how the considerable fortune left by the recently deceased lawyer Elton had been donated entirely to non-profit organizations by his family. Dan must have seen this news and realized there indeed was an inheritance, becoming furiously enraged. There was a slight lie in my earlier statement about there being no inheritance for me as a stepdaughter. Although it was true that Elton and I had no blood relation, my parents had remarried when I was still in elementary school, and I had been legally adopted. My dad, a renowned lawyer, had prepared a will long ago, leaving all his estate to me. Of course, being drafted by a professional lawyer, it was legally impeccable. When my dad passed away, Dan was already leading a wasteful and lazy life. Fearing that revealing the inheritance would only lead him to squander it without working, I chose to remain silent. And what about that amount? $2 million. With that kind of money, I wouldn't have to worry about living expenses ever again. Why did you keep quiet, you idiot? Now that we were divorced and essentially strangers, he had no claim over my family's money. He seemed furious, having lost the chance to access a significant sum of money. That's exactly why. I wouldn't want to give anything, not even a cent, to someone who doesn't work seriously and is only obsessed with other people's money. After my firm statement, Dan let out a pitiful sound on the other end of the phone. Yuto, incredulous and persistent to the end, asked, "Are you really telling me everything was donated? Not even a little bit left for yourself?" Amazed at his inability to let go, I responded, "Truly, not a cent was left. Every last bit of Dad's money has been donated. There's nothing left here." A loud and blatant sigh of frustration came through the phone. "You really are an idiot. Why would you donate everything? You could have had a good life if you kept it for yourself. Ah, well. I guess divorcing a stupid woman was the right choice after all." With those parting words filled with disdain, he hung up the phone, ending the conversation unilaterally. Finally, the storm had passed. I took a deep breath and promptly blocked Dan's number, seeking to close that chapter of my life for good. In the aftermath, it seemed Dan continued his reckless lifestyle, drinking away his sorrows nightly, further deteriorating his performance and reputation at work. Furthermore, his actions post-divorce, especially marrying for an inheritance and then quickly divorcing after my dad's death, became known at his workplace, further diminishing his character in the eyes of his colleagues. Curious, I used social media to look up Dan's mistress and easily found her account. It appeared Dan had been quite generous with her while he was counting on my dad's inheritance. However, with everything gone, he could no longer afford to pamper her as before. Upon reading a post from a mistress saying, "The guy I was seeing finally divorced his wife, but lately he's always complaining about not having any money. There are no more gifts or dinners. I was with him because he seemed like he could afford to spoil me, but I think it's time to break up." I held my aching head. If Dan was after our money, it seems his mistress was after Dan's money. It turns out, every single one of them was greedy for money, lacking any decency. I closed the page with a stern face, deciding never to visit it again. It was about 3 weeks after my last phone call with Dan. An unexpected visitor arrived at my workplace. A colleague, looking somewhat troubled, came to fetch me, and in the hallway waited Dan, looking worse for wear than before. "What are you doing, showing up at my work like this?" As I spoke nervously, Dan looked at me with a sleazy grin, as if trying to charm me. "After thinking, when your bonus went up and mine went down, you must have some savings, right? I've racked up some debt from shopping on credit and using my card for drinks. It's gotten to the point where it's affecting my living expenses. I was hoping you could help me out a bit. Please?" I was taken aback, having never expected the conversation to turn to my finances, and my eyes widened in surprise. "I've been using loans for shopping and my card for drinking, and now I've accumulated debt. If this continues, it'll affect my living situation. I need a little help. Come on, it's okay, right?" Dan pleaded, clasping his hands together. "Please." His audacity to now ask for my savings, after finally giving up on my dad's inheritance, was staggering. I felt dizzy with disbelief and nearly collapsed on the spot. "Absolutely not." I spoke firmly, directly. "Every time you look at someone, it's money, money, money. I'm sick of it. If you want money that badly, work for it earnestly, save up, and earn it yourself. Don't give me that scary look. You really are ugly. You want to know how much debt I have? It's $20,000. The girl I thought I'd marry recently dumped me for being stingy, and now I'm at rock bottom. Can't you help me out just a bit?" He persisted, his face a picture of misery. The sight of him sulking after losing both money and women was just pitiful and ugly. "It's your own fault for recklessly depending on my family and accumulating debt on your own. Take care of it yourself. It's really bothersome, so please, just leave now." As our heated exchange attracted attention, employees and security guards began to gather. Many of my colleagues, familiar with my dad and having attended my wedding, recognized Dan. My boss, who arrived promptly, had security escort Dan out, ensuring the situation was resolved peacefully, then assured me he would make arrangements to prevent Dan from entering the company premises in the future. Then my boss. Expressing anger towards Dan, my boss sympathized with me. Furthermore, my boss praised my diligent and accurate work performance and told me that my next evaluation would reflect positively on this. Additionally, my boss praised my diligent and accurate work performance and promised that the next appraisal would positively reflect this. Afterwards, Dan, whose lifestyle had deteriorated, started to frequently arrive late and miss work without notice, eventually leading to his dismissal from the company. Of course, he had no savings to speak of, and soon he couldn't pay for rent or living expenses, leading to him being evicted and seemingly lost on the streets. Dan, whose health had declined due to excessive drinking and who had become unkempt, was of course unable to find re-employment as a full-time employee. Somehow, he managed to find a live-in part-time job and is slowly paying off his debt with the meager wages he earns. For years, he continued to deceive a woman, and when things didn't go his way, he would become infuriated. Incapable of proper self-management, he allowed himself to drift towards easier paths, continually indulging his weaknesses. Such a self-centered, childish man is now forced to live a constrained life, gritting his teeth through hardship. Unbeknownst to Dan, I still had a secret. The condo where I lived, a property my dad left in a prime location in Tokyo, held significant asset value. After living here for a while, I'm considering finding a new place to live or, if I find a new partner someday, selling this condominium. Moreover, while it's true that the inheritance was donated, it wasn't the full amount as I told Dan. Eltonsville had stated, "Feel free to use it as you wish, but make sure to use some for yourself too." Knowing my interest in supporting children's charities worldwide, my dad had anticipated my decision to donate. I chose not to betray my beloved dad's wishes, and kept a portion for myself, as advised in his will. A quarter of the inheritance, amounting to $500,000, currently sits in my account. Of course, I won't spend it on brand name goods just for show or on fleeting pleasures that hold no lasting value. I intend to use it carefully for my future, valuing its significance.
Sally, you know what? If I can find evidence of how badly you've treated me, the law states that I could get an increased alimony in the divorce settlement.
Wow, you're such a terrible person. But considering our future life together, I guess that's the best way to go about it. I never imagined that behind my back, Tom was having these kinds of conversations with his mistress. He's completely ignoring his own infidelity while trying to frame me as the one at fault, just so he can get a bigger slice of the alimony pie. I feel pathetic for not seeing through his true colors sooner. But I can't afford to wallow in self-pity forever. I have someone precious I need to protect. No matter what, I have to safeguard my life with Henry, and I won't rest until I make that man pay for what he's done. That cheating bastard who's been having the time of his life, and that homewrecker who shattered my family while I was struggling with infertility treatments. I'll never forgive them. I'm Maria. I'm a working mom and I will be turning 37 this year. Living with my husband Tom, who's 6 years older, and our only son Henry. It's been 15 years since I graduated college and started working full-time at a welfare organization. Every day is a whirlwind of work and mommy duties. The welfare group I work for exclusively uses office supplies from the manufacturer Tom works at. So Tom and I go way back. Tom is a salesman at a major stationery company, and he's got a real way with words. When I was a newbie, I was at the very bottom of the totem pole. Ordering supplies, dealing with manufacturers, all the grunt work fell on my shoulders. That's when I met Tom.
Thanks for everything, as always. You know, Maria, I've always thought you have a beautiful smile.
Flattery will get you nowhere, mister. What's with the sudden compliment?
I'm just the type who blurts out whatever that's on my mind. I bet if I had a meal with you, it would taste dozens of times better than usual.
Back then, Tom was popular with the other female employees and super handsome, so I certainly didn't mind being complimented like that. Smooth talker, huh? Well then, how about we grab a bite sometime? You like your booze, don't you, Tom?
How'd you know that?
That sticker on your phone, it's from that wine event, right? I went to that too. We really hit it off chatting about the wine event and started going out for drinks after that. The more dates we went on, the more naturally the topic of marriage came up. I was 25 and Tom was 31 when we tied the knot. The timing felt just right, and as someone who loves good food, I felt lucky to be marrying a guy I could geek out about the same interests with. Married life was going smoothly, but every now and then Tom would catch me off guard with some out-of-the-blue comments. One time, Tom suddenly said he wanted to buy a house. We hadn't been married long and didn't have any kids yet. It completely threw me for a loop.
Wait, you want to buy a house now of all times? Yes, now. Just hear me out.
This was right around the time I turned 31. And was in the thick of fertility treatments. Each day felt like being stuck in a tunnel with no end in sight. The ever-increasing expenses and stress were suffocating me.
But you never even mentioned wanting our own place before. Isn't this too sudden?
There were plenty of times I couldn't figure out what Tom was thinking, but this was the first time he'd ever sprung something so unexpected on me.
We don't know what the future holds. There could be job transfers and whatnot.
Tom works for a big stationery company, and talks of relocating for work come up every few years. When you're married and thinking about having kids, you can't help being sensitive to that stuff. Tom seemed to have been thinking about it too.
I want us to build our future right here. What do you think, Maria?
I know what you mean. My family's close by too, and I don't want to leave this place.
I had a feeling you'd feel the same way.
For all we knew, we could have a baby any day. I didn't want any big changes to our current situation. I agreed to Tom's suggestion and we started making preparations to get our own house.
Thank you for understanding. It means a lot.
Just then, I remembered something my father had said. It just so happens that my dad has some land he's planning to repurpose from rice fields. He's looking to sell it now, so I'll ask if he'd be willing to give it to us instead.
What a stroke of luck!
If that works out, it would be such a blessing. When I consulted my father about the land and building our own home, he gladly agreed to hand it over to us. We decided to accept the plot from my parents and build our dream house there. The only issue was whose name to put on the deed. Due to his student loans and other debts, Tom didn't pass the screening for a mortgage. It was an unexpected hurdle, but we were both determined to build our home no matter what.
The thing is, I've got some money I've borrowed, so I can't qualify for a mortgage. Would it be okay to put it in your name, Maria?
I'm working too, so I think it'll be fine. I'll apply under my name then. In the end, the mortgage went through under my name and we were able to build our house without problems. 2 years after moving into our new home, we welcomed our long-awaited baby boy. I was increasingly grateful we had our own place. But there was one thing that nagged at me. During my fertility treatments, there were times around my pregnancy and delivery when I couldn't get in touch with Tom. It wasn't uncommon for my messages to go unread for days. Is it really possible for a regular office worker like Tom to be unreachable for days at a time? But I figured there was no use in dwelling on it. With our new house to pay for, I continued working while raising Henry. Juggling a full-time job with dropping Henry off at daycare could be tough at times, but thinking of Tom and Henry gave me the strength to push through. Today is another day to pick up Henry from the daycare center. Tom always seems to be swamped with work, So the daycare drop-offs and pickups have pretty much become 100% my responsibility.
Mommy, you're here!
Henry, I missed you so much. The moment I pick him up is pure happiness. Sometime after Henry had gotten used to going to daycare, Tom suddenly brought up the idea of extracurricular lessons for him.
Hey, what do you think about signing Henry up for gymnastics classes or something?
Huh? Gymnastics? Why all of a sudden? I asked as Tom scratched his head.
I mean, it's good for boys to be physically coordinated, right? It'd be sad if he got called slow or clumsy because he's not athletic.
I'm not particularly athletic myself, so the thought of sending him to gymnastics never crossed my mind. But Tom had a point, being physically capable certainly can't hurt. It's important to make sure kids don't develop an aversion to sports while they're young.
This gymnastics school seems to have a good reputation,
Tom said as he showed me a social media video. It featured a teacher dressed like an idol, smiling and dancing as she introduced the facilities.
The monthly fee is affordable and they offer sign-up gifts, so I think it's a good choice.
Wow, I didn't know places like this existed these days. All right then. Henry mentioned wanting to try lessons before, so I'll take him to observe a class. Seeing other kids his age having fun probably made Henry want to join too. Since Henry was asking for it, we decided to enroll him in the gymnastics school. By the way, this gymnastics place is a bit far from home. What about transportation?
Oh, I'll handle the drop-offs and pickups, don't worry. I'm the one who suggested it, after all. Really? But aren't you busy with work? It's fine, I'm telling you. It's my only chance to really talk with Henry.
Tom is a workaholic and barely gets any days off. Coming home on the last train every night is the norm for him. So for him to volunteer for this was enough to make me wonder what brought about the change.
Things have settled down at work lately with some departmental shuffles and restructuring. My new boss is more understanding if I explain the situation.
I see. So it's okay to leave the transportation to you?
Of course. Leave it to me.
True to his word, on days when Henry had gymnastics, Tom would without fail come home on time. I thought maybe this was an important bonding time for both Tom and Henry. So I decided not to interfere and just watch over them. Little did I know that decision would turn out to be a mistake, but that realization would come a bit later. Several months had passed since Henry started his gymnastics lessons. At first, he had trouble fitting in due to his shy personality, but now he had made close friends and seemed to be enjoying his classes. Usually, Tom would handle Henry's drop-offs and pickups, but he said he absolutely couldn't get off work this time, so I had to go instead. The destination was saved in the car's GPS, so I wouldn't get lost, but since it was my first time going, I felt a little nervous. When I arrived at the gym, Henry was so engrossed in practicing his cartwheels that he didn't even notice me. He would almost nail it but then tumble over. As I stood there transfixed by his repeated attempts, I sensed someone approaching me.
Hello there.
Thank you for always taking care of my son. It was the woman dressed like an idol who I had seen in the facility introduction video Tom showed me before. I hadn't met her during Henry's enrollment process, so today was our first encounter.
Dad's not here today, huh? Is this your first time, Mom? I'm Sally,
she said, all while intently looking me up and down. I'm not used to being stared at so intensely, so it made me oddly nervous. Unable to bear her appraising gaze, as if she were sizing me up, I decided to strike up a conversation. My husband usually handles the transportation, but he said work would run late today, so I'm filling in. We really appreciate you looking after Henry.
Is that so? But is he really at work today?
Sally's eyes were sharp as she looked at me. Huh? He definitely said it was for work. He always comes home on time every Tuesday for this gymnastics class, but I guess today just didn't work out. At that, Sally broke into a smile and clapped her hands.
I see. He really is a great dad, isn't he?
Something about the way Sally said that with a nasty grin rubbed me the wrong way. But I had no reason to be on this gymnastics teacher's bad side when we just met, so I brushed it off as my imagination. That's just how dads should be, right? Sally's words and actions raised some red flags, but I let it slide and decided to head home. But looking back, I wish I had tried to glean more clues from Sally that time. Of course, I had no inkling of the regrets to come. In the end, Tom didn't get home until around 10 p.m.
How was Henry's gymnastics today?
I went, and I don't think there were any issues.
You didn't say anything unnecessary, did you?
He could at least express some gratitude, but instead he takes that tone with me? Ignoring my displeasure, Tom abruptly changed the subject.
Unnecessary things?
Never mind.
Oh, by the way, I'll be away on a business trip starting tomorrow, so, yeah. A sudden business trip, huh? Until when?
With that, Tom started walking toward the bedroom, irritably loosening his tie.
Until when? That depends on how work goes. How would I know?
Oh, I see. Tom's made no effort to hide his foul mood lately. Better not to pry, I guess. The first weekend rolled around after Tom left for his business trip. I decided to clean Tom's study. Knowing him, I bet he never cleans it himself and it's a total mess in there. I brought in a vacuum cleaner, a rag, and a disinfectant spray with the intention of doing some serious cleaning. Bracing myself, I opened the door to the study, and in that instant, I remember feeling that something was off. Tom's study was oddly spotless. The papers were neatly stacked on the right side, the files organized by height, and the cords tidily bundled. Every single thing was clean to a degree I never would have imagined from the Tom I knew. The desk, without a speck of dust, looked like something out of a model room. Honestly, with everything this spotless, there was nothing left for me to do. With that thought, I grabbed my cleaning supplies and was about to leave the room when it suddenly hit me. Had Tom ever kept his study this clean before? He was the type who couldn't care less how messy his space got, utterly indifferent to it all. Henry, on the other hand, had a weak constitution since he was little, and house dust was his worst enemy. Tom never cleaned his study, so whenever he came out of there, it often triggered coughing fits for Henry that wouldn't stop. No matter how many times I warned him or pleaded with him for Henry's sake, Tom never lifted a finger to clean, not even once. Why the hell should I have to clean? If it bugs you that much, you do it, Maria.
You've got work documents and stuff in there, right? If I go messing with things and you can't find them later, that's on you. Besides, I want you to clean what you can because the house dust makes Henry's cough non-stop.
I'll never forget how irritated Tom sounded when he retorted.
What's wrong with him is that he's coughing pathetically even though he's a boy.
Must have inherited your weak constitution, Maria. Tom, who had no qualms saying hurtful things just to get out of cleaning. There's no way that same Tom would clean this much without a reason. For him to tidy up to this extent, there had to be some motive behind it. First, I checked his desk and noticed papers sticking out in an odd way. Pulling them out, I found divorce papers, all filled out. Every section that required Tom's input was completed. Had I done something to make him bring up divorce? As I searched for any other potential clues, I spotted something glinting in the crack of his closet. Trepidatiously, I took a look and found an unfamiliar dolphin charm.
Huh? What's this charm? There's even half a heart on it. What's the matter?
It's nothing. The charm with a glittering blue dolphin and half a heart was attached to a smartphone I'd never seen before. His work phone. But didn't Tom say he was going on a business trip? Would he really forget to bring his work phone on a business trip? My curiosity piqued. I opened the folio-style smartphone case. It looked like a normal case, but the card slot seemed oddly bulky. When I felt it, there was a single photo inside. The photo, seemingly taken at an aquarium, showed Tom and Sally together. In the corner, a child could also be seen. I had a bad feeling about this. As much as I wanted it to be a lie, I couldn't stop wondering what was on that smartphone. Given that he had a photo with Sally, it definitely wasn't his work phone. It wasn't the one he used in front of me either, so then, could it be a phone he got solely to contact his affair partner? Probably never imagining anyone else would see it, the smartphone didn't have a lock on it. Considering myself lucky, I opened up the phone. Nervously checking his messages, I found a mountain of evidence of his cheating. It seemed he met Sally, the gymnastics teacher, through a dating app and was using this smartphone to communicate with her. When I opened the messaging app, there was a speech bubble next to Sally's name.
Let's hurry up and get divorced so we can be together.
And selfie icon that read. As I scrolled, I spotted a message from Tom to Sally.
Just wait a bit. If I can get proof that Maria treated me horribly, I should be able to get more alimony in the divorce.
Well, aren't you awful? But I suppose that's for the best, considering our life together from here on.
I want to hurry up and live together with the child I had with you, Sally.
That's the kind of exchange that was left behind. His child? Wondering what on earth this meant, I read a bit further into the messages and discovered that apparently, he had a child with Sally. And at this very moment, it came to light that he was on an adultery trip with Sally, using his paid time off. The travel plans they were discussing were for that very day. Reading it made me feel sick to my stomach, but I couldn't afford to throw up here. Continuing to read, new facts emerged. Tom and Sally had a 6-year-old daughter together. They were planning a party for when they officially registered their marriage, and after divorcing me, he intended to move Sally and their child into this house to live together. From what I could gather in the messages, it seemed he had cheated on me with someone he met through a dating app while I was struggling with fertility treatments. Unforgivable. Along with my disillusionment with Tom, I could see what I needed to do. I had to protect my life with Henry. Without delay, I launched my counterattack. I thought the secret affair phone and divorce papers alone might not be strong enough as evidence. If I wasn't careful, he might find a way to weasel out of it. To further solidify my proof, I searched through drawers and closets. That's when I found a marriage registration form and a pair of rings engraved with Sally's name. I added my own name and necessary information to the completed divorce papers I found in the room and went to submit them. Without his knowledge, of course. For him to have everything prepared that meticulously, it could only mean one thing. More than anything, I couldn't bear the thought of living under the same roof as someone capable of infidelity. The fact that he had the divorce papers ready to that extent, with all his sections filled out, meant he was fully intent on divorcing from the start. Considering he even had a marriage form with Sally and their rings neatly tucked away in a drawer, I certainly wasn't going to end my revenge with just submitting the divorce papers. I wouldn't be satisfied unless I went all the way. I proceeded with the steps to sell the house. The land and house were both in my name, so there were no particular issues and I could handle the process based on my judgment alone. Shops and bus stops had popped up around our home, increasing its value, so it was an unexpected stroke of luck that I was able to sell it at a profit even after factoring in the mortgage. While Tom was away from home for work, I was able to steadily move forward with the sale talks. It took a few months, but in the end, I sold the house that was under my name. I had already explained the situation to my parents, so there was no problem with where to live after the sale. If anything, I was grateful for all the ways they helped with my and Henry's living situation. I had the cooperation of my childhood friend who worked as a real estate agent and taught me how to sell the house in secret, so the sale was done on the down low and Tom had no idea the house had been sold. As soon as I got the call from my childhood friend, I packed up my things and left the house together with Henry. Lately, even when Tom did come home, he would avoid me by returning late at night and leaving early in the morning, so he never saw me or Henry at all. Tom was still frequently away from home for business trips and work as usual, so he seemed completely oblivious to the fact that Henry and I were preparing to leave. Tom reached out to me while Henry and I were temporarily staying with my parents after leaving the house. "Where are you?" I could hear the irritation in Tom's voice over the phone, but it was just as I expected. "What does it matter where I am? Why are you suddenly calling me, Tom?" "I got off work early today, and when I got home, some stranger was there. They abruptly asked me when I could move out, which made no damn sense. Did anything happen while you were at the house, Maria?" I figured this was the right timing, so I decided to tell Tom. "I put the house up for sale while you were gone. I thought it would take longer, but I guess I got lucky." "What? What the hell are you saying? You sold my house without my permission." I was appalled by Tom's words. He seemed to be under the impression that it was his house and couldn't contain his anger. "You think you can get away with doing whatever you want without asking the man of the house?" "Man of the house? Who?" I couldn't help but retort. "Your house. What are you talking about?" "It's my house. I already know you've been hanging out at your mistress's place every day, Tom. What's that supposed to mean? It's creepy how you've been sneaking around." I could hear him click his tongue on the other end of the line. "What proof do you have that I'm cheating? And with no house, where the hell do you expect me to live?" "I don't need to spell it out for you here. Just don't forget that the land and house were in my name, got it? I don't care where you live, Tom, but hand it over pronto." "What the hell do you take me for, Maria?" "A complete stranger. I submitted the divorce papers, by the way. Go shack up with your mistress and that should solve everything, right? The one you were fooling around with while I was suffering through treatments. I won't even ask for alimony, so count yourself lucky." Then, unable to contain his glee, Tom started talking over the phone. "I couldn't care less about you, Maria. Do whatever you want. I never planned on paying alimony anyway." After hearing Tom's words, I hung up the phone. Not once did he bring up Henry or show even a shred of concern for him. I couldn't forgive Tom for that. Honestly, I had even thought that as long as I could quickly leave Tom behind, driven solely by my own pain, that would be enough. But I realized that was the wrong approach. I had to find a way to hurt Tom, who didn't spare a single thought for Henry and acted like he didn't even exist. Somehow, I wanted to make Tom pay. That's when I got some good news from an acquaintance at the gymnastics school. Apparently, Sally was planning a wedding party and inviting her close friends. It seemed Sally was connected with some of the gymnastics school moms on social media. She had supposedly made posts on there hinting at a party she was planning at a rented-out wedding venue. An acquaintance gave me her account info, so I checked it out right away and saw Sally's posts gushing with happiness. "The joy of marrying someone you truly love." From the way she was posting, you could tell her head was filled with bliss. Following her social media posts, I was able to find out the wedding party's location and date, so I decided to crash it that day. On the day of the wedding party, I was at the wedding hall in the neighboring town. Henry and I had been eagerly awaiting this day. I couldn't believe he cheated on me without any regard for our family, and his mistress had to be our son's gymnastics teacher of all people.
Let's go.
Yeah. Mom, can you tell him directly?
Yep. And Henry, you don't need to push yourself, okay?
Henry looked at me and smiled.
Mom, I thought something might be up since you always seemed down when Dad was around, but don't overdo it yourself, okay?
The wedding hall had an open setup, so it had a welcoming vibe like anyone could come in. When I dropped Tom's name, I was immediately led into the venue where they were introducing the bride and groom's profiles. They spun the story of how Sally met Tom while working as a gymnastics instructor in an unfamiliar place as a single mother, finally reaching the goal of marriage. Watching the meticulously crafted profile video made me want to hurl, but I couldn't afford to lose it here. I made my way through the crowd and reached where Sally was. Sally had just finished talking with a friend and was standing alone, so I thought the timing was perfect. I approached from behind and tapped her on the shoulder. The way Sally's face stiffened when she turned around still makes me laugh to this day.
Long time no see, Teach. How've you been?
I'll never forget the shocked look on Sally's face when she saw me.
What? No way. Henry's mom? Why are you here? I should be asking you that. Throwing a wedding party like this. So you're the one Tom's remarrying, huh?
For a moment she looked uncomfortable, but quickly replied. We just had a fateful encounter while I was working at the gymnastics school. The only difference is timing, but I was his destined partner, you see.
I hear you have a child, Sally. So you and Tom are getting married with kids in tow?
It's just like we showed in the profile video. He loves me, child and all, so I decided to marry him. The child was the one I saw in the corner of the photo tucked in that smartphone case. Watching the kid next to Sally boredly playing games on a phone, it was easy to imagine they hadn't been raising the child properly. I borrowed the mic from the MC and shouted out right then and there.
Everyone, I'm Tom's ex-wife who he just recently divorced. Sally says she's remarrying and bringing a child from her previous husband, but take a look at this.
I held up a single sheet of paper.
I have the results of a DNA test right here. We had it done, and well, what do you know? The connection was proven.
The wedding guests started making a commotion. The group that had been boredly drinking until now and the women who were fixing their hair all turned to look at me.
Which means your child is not a stepchild to my ex-husband. They were actually parent and child from the start. How does it feel to have introduced the child born from an affair to the real father? What? Why would you say something like that?
The human gaze is hard to deceive, and the murmuring only grew louder and louder. I couldn't wrap my head around the nerve of showing up as the father to a child born from cheating. Just moments ago, they were brazenly spinning the tale of a fated marriage in their backstory and profiles, so it was no wonder the guests were watching with shock and curiosity.
I'm amazed you were this close. To think you had more than a teacher-student's parent relationship. But I wonder what people at your work will say when they find out the truth behind this marriage. We just matched on an app, okay? Leave it alone.
Beside me, Henry was recording the wedding on his phone. I took the phone from Henry and told Sally and Tom.
I wonder what would happen if I sent this video to your coworkers. From the looks of it, I bet they have no idea you've been having an affair for years.
I showed them the customer inquiry pages on both their companies' websites. Then I operated the phone and attached the video I just recorded.
If you thought you could cheat and start a new life scot-free, you're dead wrong, Sally and Tom. You're sending this to our workplaces? What good would that do? Exactly. They'll just think it's some prank video or something. No one can tear apart our destined bond.
Undaunted by their words, I continued.
You see, I sent this directly to your bosses at work, no, to people even higher up than that. What? What do you mean? I sent an inquiry a little while back and was told they wanted to be contacted directly. We agreed that I would send it like this. Why the hell would you do that on your own? What are we supposed to do now? My promotion was riding on this.
Tom clutched his head in frustration, but that's none of my concern.
I don't know what you reported to them, but I can't imagine your companies would tolerate infidelity. You better be prepared for the fallout.
As I spoke, Tom and Sally glared at me in vexation, but the story doesn't end there. Right after the wedding, the two of them were apparently called in by their respective workplaces. Not only was Tom's path to promotion blocked, I heard he got transferred to a regional branch. Even if he wanted to quit, he has no special skills to speak of, and they saw right through the fact that he couldn't realistically change jobs at his age. As for Sally, she was fired and now has to live on Tom's income alone. Even with a child, he got demoted and his meager salary will make it tough to get by. Sally's social media, which used to be filled with glamorous posts, gradually became overrun with complaints. Posts that clearly showed she was mentally unwell or desperately seeking attention started to stand out, and her follower count visibly dwindled. Occasionally, there are blatant posts bad-mouthing me. I bet she hasn't doubted for a second that what she did was wrong. In a way, I'm almost envious she can live her life with such a lack of self-awareness. Now, I used the money from selling the house to buy an apartment where I'm living with Henry. Henry is about to reach the age to graduate elementary school. Our new life keeps me busy with all sorts of things, but I feel like I can overcome it all as long as I'm with Henry.
Mom, where should I put this box?
Oh, that one goes in the next room.
Okay. What should I do with this?
Henry showed me a cardboard box filled with Tom's belongings. I was considering throwing it out, but then thought it wasn't right to toss it without permission, so I was stumped about how to dispose of it. As we were sorting through our things, noon rolled around.
It's already this late.
I'm gonna pop over to the nearby convenience store. What do you want for lunch? I'll pick something up.
The new pasta they just released. I've been wanting to try it ever since I saw the commercial.
Got it. Actually, let's both take a break and go shopping together. When we walked out to the apartment entrance, I laid eyes on someone I couldn't believe. It was Tom. I had only told a select few people the address of our new apartment, but somehow Tom found out and was standing in front of the building. I nearly screamed when I saw him.
Long time no see.
I guess he can't shake the habit of trying to act cool. When he saw me and Henry, he raised the corner of his mouth and lifted his hand. That gesture that seemed so suave when we were dating now just looks pathetic.
Huh? What are you doing here? Wow, you sound so harsh. Is it so wrong to want to see you once in a while?
Once in a while? Henry, and I don't want to see your face at all. He glared at me and then immediately turned to face Henry.
About time you started wanting to see your old man again, huh? I know, let's hit up a family restaurant. Order whatever you want, it's on me.
Henry brushed off his hand and looked at Tom with an expression like he was staring at something filthy.
Don't joke around. Why the hell would I go to a restaurant with you? You? What's with that attitude? You go and cheat without a care, wreck our lives, and now it's all I'm so happy these days. Maybe I should grace my kid with my presence once in a while.
Spare us the bad comedy routine. Tom tried to grab us in a fit of anger, but Henry dodged him. In the blink of an eye, Henry had Tom locked in a grapple.
What? What's going on?
Henry has been practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since he started elementary school. He's now one of the top-ranked practitioners in the States, so his skills are the real deal. Tom, caught in Henry's self-defense technique, has a look on his face like he can't comprehend what's happening. The way he effortlessly applies the hold with such fluid movements is enough to make even me, his mother, stare in awe.
I'm glad I kept up my training all this time, thinking I'd protect Mom from getting hurt. Let go of me! You think it's okay to use violence against your father? I don't think of you as a father. Going there with you will ruin the restaurant. Still not getting it?
I guess being told off like that by his own son was a real shock, because he turned and left. I was surprised to see how strong Henry had become, and it filled me with joy. After that, Tom stopped showing his face around us. Honestly, I didn't want to see him anyway, so good riddance. Despite everything that happened, I think Henry grew up to be a strong yet kind young man. As a parent, I couldn't be happier. Maybe it got through to him that I never wanted him to take after Tom, his father, but Henry really is a sweetheart. It makes me shudder to think what would have happened if I had ignored that divorce filing and kept living as I was. I'm still working at the same job as before, but I feel like this was the right choice. Now, I've renewed my resolve to live for my own and Henry's happiness.
Hey, how much of Ben's inheritance am I gonna get?
My husband David blurts out, his words dripping with greed. My only family, my father, had just passed away suddenly, and we had barely finished the funeral. As I was drowning in grief, David didn't offer any comfort and nonchalantly started talking about money. My dad was a famous lawyer who often appeared in the media, and his earnings must have been quite substantial. When David and I first got married, we got along well and he never showed any desire for my father's status or wealth. But within a few months, he started acting strange. He stopped doing household chores, slacked off at work causing his performance reviews to drop, and went out drinking every night only to show up hungover at the office. Eventually, he became so self-indulgent that he had no qualms about being absent from work without notice. I suppose he had grown complacent, relying on my father's money. And now that my father had passed away, he finally revealed his true colors. His attitude, trampling on my loneliness and feelings of mourning for the deceased, filled me with a sadness that made me want to scream and cry, and an anger that welled up from the depths of my stomach at the same time. Lying on the bed, I told David without even making eye contact. There is no inheritance. I'm Mom's stepchild from long ago. I'm not a real family member, so I can't inherit anything. 0. David's face instantly turned pale.
You're lying, a stepchild? What the hell? You never told me that before.
He shouted. As I calmly explained, David suddenly let out a yell that reverberated throughout the room.
You deceived me. I was expecting an inheritance knowing your dad was a famous lawyer. I made a mistake marrying a plain-looking, middle-aged woman like you. I'm divorcing you right away.
He screamed angrily in a harsh tone and smashed everything on the table onto the floor. The pair of stuffed animals, the photo frame with our wedding photos, the mirror we bought on a trip, the mementos of our time together shattered one after another with loud crashes. Was this the true feelings of the David I had loved so much, the one I had shared so many fun times with when we first met? Overwhelmed by a mix of disappointment and disillusionment, I collapsed weakly on the spot. I couldn't let David see the smile I couldn't hold back. My name is Rala. I'm 36 years old and work at a cosmetics company. My husband's name is David. He's 5 years younger than me, and we met at a foreign language school we were attending at the time. Both David and I work in sales at different companies, and we were studying languages again to keep up with the recent globalization. My father is a famous lawyer who often appears in the media, known as the go-to attorney that everyone wants to consult with. Of course, his sales and assets seem to be quite substantial. We keep our family out of the media spotlight, so my existence isn't widely known to the public, but it still gets around to those around us. The neighbors, acquaintances, friends, and people at work often said various things about my father. With my father being wealthy, many people mistakenly assumed I was financially well off too and would approach me for money. By my 20s, I was already fed up with that situation. I had a few boyfriends, but in the end, everyone was after my father's assets. As soon as we got a little closer, they would say things like wanting me to introduce them to my father or assuming he would support us if we got married. They were all counting on my father's money, and each time I broke up with them, everyone only cared about my father. No one truly saw me for who I am. David, who approached me persistently when I was emotionally unstable, always talked about foreign language lessons and everyday life. Even when I gave in to his enthusiastic invitations and went on a few dates, the topic of my father never came up, and he acted normal when we talked about each other's family. Maybe David didn't know about my father. David always seemed to genuinely enjoy talking with me. We would eat at affordable restaurants, go to theme parks together, and spend carefree days like a normal couple. I have so much fun just being with you, Rala. Seeing you smile next to me makes me feel happy. I really respect how you never slack off in your work, hobbies, or self-improvement. David said to me as we ate delivery pizza together in his room. I want to keep enjoying lots of things together with you. If it's okay, will you be my girlfriend? After slowly opening up to David through our dates, his words made my heart feel warm. This person truly sees me for who I am. With him, we can support each other in life. Tears welled up in my eyes, and the pizza in my mouth suddenly tasted salty, yet somehow sweet. Thank you. I'm so happy when I'm with you too, David. I'm looking forward to our future together, I replied. David lovingly supported my back as tears streamed down my face. He never counted on my money to take me to fancy restaurants or eagerly wanted to visit my family's house as if appraising it. The ordinary happiness of eating simple home-cooked meals or delivery pizza in our small rooms had finally come to me too. Filled with a sense of security, I couldn't help but hug David. And so, we continued dating smoothly, but even during that time, David never showed any interest in my family's house. After about 3 years of a normal relationship, we decided to get engaged. If we were going to get married, we had to introduce each other to our parents. I was quite nervous about inviting David to my family's house. Since David didn't seem to know about my father, I was a little scared that he might be surprised and run away. When my father appeared and introduced himself to us as we waited in the living room, David was utterly shocked. Wait, are you the lawyer who's on TV every week, the one everyone wants to consult with? David asked in astonishment. My father let out a hearty laugh at David's surprised reaction. Yes, I am that lawyer. You're the first person to date my daughter and make it this far without knowing. I'm quite surprised myself, he said, still chuckling. David apologetically expressed his regret to my father, who was still laughing after saying that. I'm sorry. I was being absent-minded. I didn't properly ask Rala either. The truth is, I haven't been taking her to nice places for our dates. I've been very rude to both Rala and you. I'm terribly sorry. David continued to apologize. My father, still smiling, said to him, It's all right. You're marrying my daughter, not me.
my daughter's life is her own. You don't need to worry about me at all. The best thing is for you two to support each other in a life where you can both feel happiness." My father's demeanor was calm yet dignified, making us feel the depth of his life experience and character as a lawyer who had handled various difficult cases and also worked extensively in the media. Moved by my father's words, David straightened his back, his eyes shining. "Yes. I may never be able to achieve as much as you. And I may be younger and unreliable, but I'll do my best to make Rala happy." My father warmly watched over us. A few months later, we were able to hold our wedding ceremony and officially register our marriage without any issues. Some relatives remarked that the scale of the wedding was small for the daughter of a famous lawyer, but it was based on my and David's wish to have a lovely ceremony with just close family. We moved into an apartment to live together and began our married life as a couple. Even after getting married, we got along well and lived frugally together. To save money, we both quit the foreign language school, but instead, I started having more opportunities to interact with overseas clients at work, and now I'm acquiring foreign languages through practical experience. David seemed to end up staying the same, but he appeared to be working hard at his sales job as he always had. What kind of life would we lead together from now on? I wanted to travel together, and someday, I wanted to have children. I wanted us to steadily walk together towards a happy future. That's what I thought. But was I the only one who felt that way? A few months after our marriage, gradual changes started to appear in David's attitude. At first, he would help with household chores in the evenings and on days off, but recently, he won't even take care of himself, let alone do chores. Clothes left strewn about, dishes he ate from abandoned on the table. When he noticed we were out of daily necessities, he used to take the initiative to go buy them, but lately, he just roughly orders me around, saying things like, "We're out of milk." And what made me doubt my eyes the most was how his spending had become more extravagant. Before, he would invest in himself by going to foreign language school, but he wasn't the type to splurge on food or entertainment. Just as he had told my father, when we went out, he often chose affordable restaurants. That's why I was especially happy when he splurged a little for our anniversary. But now, even when it's not our anniversary, he casually buys expensive brand name watches and nonchalantly makes reservations at 3-star restaurants I've never even been to, saying he's going out drinking with friends. It was so egregious that I asked him, "I understand wanting to splurge, but is our money situation okay?" He brushed me off, saying things like, "I'm married now, so I have to do at least this much to keep up appearances." Even when I cautioned him, "We need to increase our savings for when we have children in the future, so it's problematic if you splurge on your own too much," he responded irresponsibly with, "It'll be fine. We'll manage somehow." Around the time I was fed up with David's carelessness, the bonus season arrived. There wasn't a big change in my bonus, and if anything, it had gone up a little, perhaps because my daily efforts were recognized. The problem was with David, the numbers on his bonus statement had decreased by a digit. Even David looked a bit dissatisfied about this, and when I asked, "It's been reduced to about 1/3 of last time," he said. I hadn't heard anything about the performance of David's company or industry significantly dropping. It was clear that the assessment was due to issues with David himself. "Come to think of it, you've been going out drinking late into the night a lot recently. There were times when you went to work hungover from drinking too much, and you overslept enough to be late to the office a few times, right? Could it be that those things piled up and affected your work?" I asked, choosing my words a bit carefully. It seemed that David's work ethic had become sloppy since we got married. From his daily attitude, his stance towards work naturally became apparent.
I couldn't believe that David, who was constantly playing around and being late, could produce results at his company. Is that so? It seems like the company is having a tough time too. Won't the numbers go back to what they were before next time? David spoke as if it was someone else's problem, even though I was so worried. There was no sense at all that he would try to change his lifestyle, and despite his bonus being reduced so much, he didn't seem to have any intention of making up for it. Then one day, less than a few weeks after that incident, David was absent from work without notice. As usual, he had been out drinking late the night before, and must have come home in the middle of the night while I was fast asleep. No matter how many times I tried to wake him up the next morning, he wouldn't get up. "I don't care anymore," I said, leaving him behind as I headed to my own company. But in the end, David never woke up on his own and didn't show up at work after that. Moreover, it seemed he had continued sleeping without even contacting his company. When I came home and saw David still sleeping in the same state as that morning, I couldn't believe my eyes.
Don't tell me you seriously skipped work without notice?
I couldn't help raising my voice at his behavior, which was far too irresponsible for both a husband and a working adult. I couldn't wake up. The company called, so I took the day off. David muttered. Unbelievable. His workplace had gone out of their way to contact him, worried when he didn't show up at the scheduled time. He inconvenienced his company, didn't do his job, and on top of that, showed no sign of remorse. I felt a sense of despair towards David, who had turned into a good-for-nothing completely different from the man I married.
Do you understand what you've done? Your performance reviews are dropping, you're going to work sleep-deprived and hungover every day, and now you're skipping without notice? What are you going to do if you get fired over this?
I couldn't help crying out, deeply concerned about David's life and our future together. The next words out of David's mouth left me speechless.
Then we can just borrow money from Ben.
In that instant, everything went dark before my eyes. Since when did this man start counting on my father's wealth? I wondered in disbelief. He had promised my father that he would find happiness with me while supporting each other. He used to say he was happy just being with me and enjoyed our simple life together. I felt like a fool for believing I could find happiness with David. Now, in the end, David was only with me for the money too. He was no different from all the others in my past. Are human beings creatures who inevitably become blinded by wealth? Then was it a mistake to introduce him to my father before the wedding? Disappointment, regret, disillusionment, sadness, various emotions swirled within me. If things continue this way, I might have to consider divorce, I realized grimly. Even after that, David didn't change his attitude. Although he stopped skipping work without notice after apparently receiving a stern warning from his company, he never quit his flashy nighttime entertainment or wasteful spending. When he started showing an unbelievable level of frivolous spending, like impulsively buying expensive brand-name shoes and bags without much thought, I even felt a sense of dread thinking about what would become of David in the future. Anxious about my own life, several months ended up passing just like that. And then one day, my father suddenly passed away. It wasn't an accident or incident, but a sudden death from illness. Of course, my father's business associates and the media made a huge commotion, and those around him suddenly became very busy. Having lost my mother long ago and with no siblings, my father was my only family. Until the funeral was over, I was far too busy to even have time to cry, but when everything was finally done, a sense of loss and sadness washed over me. My father, who had single-handedly raised me while juggling his main job and media work, was always calm, wise, and the object of my utmost respect. Even when I felt like giving up during my college entrance exams or job hunting, my father's attitude of never shying away from effort and learning in anything encouraged me and helped me overcome those challenges. He was only 66 years old, far too young to pass away. As I was grieving alone in my room, David barged in without even knocking. I knew that David had barely helped with the funeral arrangements, idly fiddling with his smartphone in a corner the whole time while I was busy handling all the various preparations and correspondence. Having already given up on David after everything that had happened, I didn't even feel like scolding him in that moment. As I crouched by the bed, clinging to it and crying, David stood over me without even bothering to crouch down and meet my eyes. "Hey, how much inheritance is there?" he asked. "It all comes down to money in the end, huh?" I thought, disgusted. As I remained silent, not even bothering to respond to his words, David stepped closer and raised his voice. "How much is there?" "With how much he earned, there must be a ton of money left, right? You're his only living relative, so you'll get the inheritance, yeah?" He was grinning repulsively, even though his wife's father had just passed away. It seemed that now that my father was gone, David thought he had become a multimillionaire overnight. Lazing around without working while splurging extravagantly, that self-indulgent lifestyle dangled right in front of him, and his face looked so vulgar, as if he was about to start drooling. I even felt a sense of revulsion. Lying on the bed, I told David without even making eye contact. "There is no inheritance." David immediately shouted. "That's impossible! He died suddenly, so there's no way he used it all up." "That's not it. I'm the stepchild of my long-deceased mother. I'm not his real family, so I can't inherit anything. It's zero." Just as I told David now, I have no blood relation to the father I respected so much. This was part of the reason why my father never revealed his family to the media. "You're lying, a stepchild? What the hell? You never told me that before," he shouted. "It's true that he raised me until I became an adult and that we cherished each other, and since Mom passed away long ago, I just thought there was no need to specifically mention it." I had nothing more to say to David. Instead of telling him to get out, I sighed. Suddenly, David let out a yell loud enough to echo throughout the room. "You deceived me! Why do you think I've been sucking up to Ben all this time? Give me back these past few years!" What? For a moment, I thought my heart would stop. What did he just say? Before I could even ask, David flew into a rage and smashed everything on the table onto the floor. The pair of stuffed animals, the photo frame holding our wedding photos, the mirror we bought on a trip, the mementos of our time together shattered one after another with loud crashes. "You're an idiot, so you probably thought I was some prince who fell for you purely without knowing about Ben, right? It was all an act. There was someone in the same class as me at the foreign language school who recognized your face right away and secretly told me everything. They said there must be a ton of guys coming after you for Ben's money, so if I pretended not to know and put on a pure love act, you'd fall for it immediately." I couldn't believe it. Unlike school or work, your identity isn't revealed at hobby classes, so I had let my guard down. Since no one had ever mentioned anything about me in the foreign language class, I truly believed that David had come to like me without knowing about my father. David had just accused me of deceiving him, but I was the one who had been deceived. David clicked his tongue loudly. "What are you gonna do about this? You've ruined my whole life plan. I desperately acted like a good guy for 3 years thinking I'd get my hands on that inheritance. Otherwise, who'd bother with a plain-looking, middle-aged woman like you?" As soon as he revealed his true colors, he started saying whatever he wanted. My disappointment had already reached its limit, and I didn't have the energy to strongly argue back. I just felt my heart grow cold.
I was planning to divorce you as soon as the inheritance came through without a hitch. I've been seeing someone for about a year now, so I was gonna marry her and build a nice house with that money to let her live in luxury.
After exposing his lies to me, he even confessed to cheating. I couldn't help but react to this. I raised my face, widened my eyes, and stared intently at David.
What did you just say? A year ago? Wasn't that around the time we decided to get married?
That's right. It was just about a year ago that I had accepted David's proposal and gone to report it to my father.
Don't tell me you cheated because our marriage was decided?
That's right. If I'm gonna be with someone, of course I want a young, pretty girl. There was someone I'd had my eye on for a while. But cute girls cost money, you know? I couldn't afford to date her on my salary. So I somehow managed to secure this marriage with you. What a perfect plan. David and his petty desires had been using both me and my father all along. When David went out drinking with his friends and colleagues, was he actually spending most of that time on dates with his mistress? My heart pounded loudly with anger. My fingertips grew hot and started to tremble. This was a real waste. If you don't have money, I have no use for you. I'm divorcing you right away. David spat out. I quietly told him, facing his direction. Of course. I'd refused to be with someone who deceived us the whole time and even cheated. Let's get divorced quickly. And since you cheated, I'll be seeking compensation too. Perhaps triggered by the mention of monetary compensation, David, who had seemed to calm down after saying his piece, began to fly into a rage again. Compensation? I should be the one getting that from you. I'm the one who was deceived this whole time. And do you even have any proof of cheating to show a lawyer? Photos? Recordings? You don't have anything, do you? David taunted. Even as I felt my anger about to explode from his provocation, I tried my best to speak calmly. You're right. It would be difficult to get compensation without evidence. Then I won't seek compensation. There's no inheritance, so we can't divide assets either. Just promise that from now on, you won't have anything to do with me or my family. That's enough. David then said with emotionless eyes. Yeah, that's fine. I don't ever want to be involved with you again either. With just those words, he left the room, deliberately slamming the door hard to make a loud noise as he went. A few days later, after getting David to sign the divorce papers and the written oath he had mentioned the day before about never involving himself with me again, we got divorced. Having lost both my father and David in a matter of days, I returned to my family home feeling empty inside. My father's presence still lingered in the room he had been living in until recently, and I cried there once more. After that, I returned to work and began to get used to living alone in my family home, and a peaceful life gradually started to come back. Then, about 2 weeks later, my smartphone started ringing incessantly all day long. At work, I put it on silent mode and kept it in my locker to avoid disturbing others, but it was the same situation at home, so it was unbearably disruptive to my life. The caller was David every time. I had ignored it for several days, but it was so persistent that I decided to answer just once. If I listened to what he had to say one time, these persistent calls would probably stop. The moment I pressed the call button, David started yelling in a harsh tone from the other end.
You! How dare you lie to me back then? There was an inheritance after all, wasn't there? Why didn't you give it to me?
His shouting was so unpleasant that I reflexively pulled the receiver away from my ear. The TV in my room happened to be showing the news, and I watched it. It was a story about how the recently deceased father's relatives had donated his sizable estate entirely to non-profit organizations. David had probably seen this news, learned that there actually was an inheritance, and was now in a rage. There was actually a small lie in the story about not having an inheritance I could inherit due to lack of blood relation. It was true that I was my mother's child from a previous marriage and had no blood relation to my father, but when my parents remarried, I was still in elementary school and they had legally adopted me. And my father, a popular lawyer, had prepared a will just in case something happened, which stated that I would inherit his entire estate. Of course, since a lawyer had drawn it up, it was legally airtight. When my father passed away, David was already living a lazy life of wastefulness. So I had kept quiet, thinking that if I revealed the existence of the inheritance, he would spend it all without working.
And what the hell is up with that amount? $2 million? With that money, you'd never have to worry about living expenses again. Why did you keep quiet about it? You idiot!
Since David and I were already divorced and he was now a stranger, there was no way for him to get his hands on my family's money. David seemed to have his blood boiling from the shock and frustration of losing his chance to get his hands on a large sum of money.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't want to give even a single cent to someone who obsesses over other people's money despite not even working hard himself,
I said firmly. David let out a pathetic sound from the other end of the line.
Did you really donate it all? Didn't you keep even a little for yourself?
I was actually impressed by how bad he was at giving up as I answered.
I really donated the entire amount, not even a cent left. Dad's money is no longer in our possession.
Then I heard a blatant tongue click from the other end of the receiver.
You really are an idiot. Why the hell would you donate it? If you had kept it for yourself, you could have had a good life. I made the right call divorcing a stupid woman like you.
With those parting words, David hung up the phone unilaterally. Finally feeling calm, I blocked David's number. After that, David apparently went out drinking every day, shocked that the inheritance he was counting on from his ex-wife's father was completely gone. Of course, his work attitude and performance at the company worsened even further. Moreover, the fact that he had married his ex-wife for the inheritance and divorced her as soon as her father passed away spread throughout the company, further lowering people's opinion of his character. Meanwhile, when I tried using social media to look for David's mistress, I quickly found her personal account. It seemed David had been quite generous with her, counting on my father's inheritance, but now that it was all gone, he couldn't even put on a good face for her anymore.
The guy I was dating got divorced, but lately he keeps saying he has no money, so the presents and dinners have completely stopped. I was dating him because I thought he'd let me live in luxury, but now I'm thinking of breaking up.
Read a post by his mistress. Seeing that, I held my aching head. If David was after my father's money, it seemed his mistress was after David's money. They were all just a bunch of greedy, classless jerks. I closed that page with a straight face, deciding never to look at it again. About 3 weeks after my last phone call with David, an unexpected visitor came to my company one day. An employee in charge of the reception called for me with a troubled look, so I followed them to the hallway where David was waiting, looking much more haggard than before. "What are you thinking, coming to my workplace?" I asked. David looked at me with a fawning gaze, laughing.
"I was thinking after that. When my bonus went down, yours went up, right? So even if you don't have Ben's inheritance, you must have your own savings, yeah?"
I was shocked, never expecting him to bring up my money.
"I've been taking out loans for shopping and using my card for bar tabs, so now my debt has piled up. At this rate,
it's going to affect my life. I want you to help me out a little. Come on, please? David pleaded. Just when I thought he had finally given up on my father's inheritance, now he was coming to demand my savings. I felt so dizzy from his outrageous nerve that I nearly collapsed on the spot. Of course not, I declared. Every time you look at someone, it's money, money, money. I'm so sick of it. If you want money that badly, then work hard, save up, and make your own money. Don't make such a scary face. You're really not cute at all. Want me to tell you how much debt I'm in? $20,000. Even the woman I was going to marry dumped me recently, saying I'm too stingy. I've hit rock bottom. Can't you help me out a little? David persisted with a pathetic look on his face. Having lost both money and women, his sulking figure was simply pathetic and ugly. You selfishly counted on my family and racked up debt on your own, right? Deal with it yourself. You're really being a nuisance, so leave right now. Hearing our raised voices, employees and security guards started gathering around us. Of course, the employees close to me knew about my father and had been invited to the wedding, so they recognized David's face. My boss, who had rushed over, had the security guards escort David out, resolving the situation peacefully for the moment. Afterwards, he talked with me at length and said he would make sure David couldn't get into the company again in the future. Then my boss got angry at David, saying, I can't stand seeing someone who works so humbly and diligently suffering because of a nasty ex-husband. While sympathizing with me, he even praised my sincere and competent work ethic and told me he would give me a good assessment next time. After that, David's lifestyle completely fell apart. He started being late and skipping work without notice repeatedly until he was finally fired from his company. Of course, David had no savings, so he quickly became unable to pay rent and living expenses. He was kicked out of his home and apparently ended up on the streets. Drinking too much, his health deteriorated and his appearance worsened. Of course, it was impossible for David to find another job as a full-time employee. He's somehow working a live-in part-time job and slowly paying off his debts with his meager wages. For years, he deceived one woman and flew into a rage when things didn't go his way. He couldn't manage himself properly at all, going with the easy flow and continuing to indulge himself. Such a self-centered and immature man is now being forced to endure a constricted lifestyle. Actually, there was still something I was hiding from David. The apartment that belonged to my father, where I'm living now, is in a prime location in the city and has considerable asset value. After living here for a while, I'm considering either finding a new home or selling this apartment if I ever find a new partner. And it's not a lie that I donated the inheritance, but it wasn't the entire amount as I told David. The will stated that I could use it as I liked, but that I should use a little for myself. My father seemed to have seen through the fact that I, who had long been interested in activities to save children around the world, would donate to organizations. I won't betray my precious father. That's why I decided to keep a little for myself, as per my father's will. $500,000, which is 1/4 of the inheritance, is in my account now. Of course, I won't use it for brand name goods to show off or for valueless entertainment. I want to use it carefully for my own future.